The polished marble floors of the National Armor Museum at Fort Knox reflected the overhead lights like desert mirages. Colonel James Iron Jim Harrington stood motionless before the massive M1A1 Abrams tank displayed in the center of the main hall, its sand-colored bulk dwarfing the visitors who milled around it, snapping photos and pointing at placards. At 63, Harrington still carried himself with the rigid posture of an officer, though his once black hair had long since turned silver. His weathered face, mapped with wrinkles around his eyes, told the story of a man who had spent much of his life squinting into desert suns and through tank sights. Today marked 30 years since Operation Desert Storm, though most Americans had forgotten the details of that swift and decisive victory. Most Americans, but not the men who had fought there. For them, the sands of Kuwait and Iraq remained etched in memory, preserved like insects in amber. The museum had organized a special exhibition to commemorate the anniversary, with photographs, maps, and artifacts arranged throughout the hall. A banner hung above the entrance. Desert Storm, America's Lightning Victory. Harrington almost smiled at that. Lightning victory indeed. Clean and surgical, the history book said. Over in 100 hours of ground combat. But history books rarely captured the whole truth. His eyes drifted to a small display case containing 5 silver stars and 2 purple hearts. His medals, donated to the museum 5 years earlier when he finally admitted to himself that his grandchildren would likely store them in an attic once he was gone. Better they remain here, where they might inspire future generations of soldiers. A young man approached, notebook in hand, digital recorder visible in his shirt pocket. He couldn't have been more than 30, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that held the eager intensity of someone perpetually chasing deadlines. Colonel Harrington, Todd Cooper from American Valor magazine. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. Harrington nodded, offering a firm handshake. Mr. Cooper. The young reporter gestured toward a quieter corner of the museum where 2 chairs had been arranged. Shall we? As they walked, Cooper's eyes kept darting to the medals in the display case, then back to Harrington, as if mentally reconciling the decorated warrior with the aging man beside him. I understand this is the first time you've spoken publicly about Stormfront Valley, Cooper said, settling into his chair. May I ask why now after 30 years? Harrington's eyes hardened momentarily, then softened as he looked around at the families and veterans touring the museum. 30 years is long enough to keep secrets, Mr. Cooper. The men who served under my command in Alpha Company deserve to have their story told. The ones who made it back, and especially the ones who didn't. Cooper nodded, activating his recorder. For the record, there's no mention of a Stormfront Valley in any official Gulf War history. The battle you're describing doesn't exist in the public record. Harrington's weathered face creased into a faint smile. The public record is incomplete, young man. Always has been. Are you saying the military deliberately covered up an entire battle? Not covered up, classified. There's a difference. Operations get classified for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes political, sometimes strategic. In our case, he paused, his gaze drifting toward the massive Abrams tank. In our case, it was diplomatic. Our Saudi allies didn't want certain details publicized. Cooper leaned forward, sensing the story of his career unfolding before him. So what really happened in February 1991? Harrington closed his eyes briefly, the sounds of the museum fading away as memory transported him back 3 decades, to the heat and sand and fear. When he opened them again, his blue eyes had taken on a distant quality, as if seeing through time itself. It began with 14 tanks and 63 men. Good men, the best I ever served with. By the end, we had 3 operational tanks and 27 survivors. Cooper's eyes widened. That's a casualty rate of over 50%. Yes, Harrington said simply, and every one of them a hero. Please, Colonel, start at the beginning. Harrington nodded slowly. The beginning, February 1991. I was a captain then, commanding Alpha Company 3rd Battalion, 2nd Armored Regiment, 1st Armored Division. We called ourselves the Steel Wolves. Chapter 2, Return to the Past. The desert stretched endlessly under a merciless February sun. Captain James Harrington stood atop his M1A1 Abrams tank, binoculars raised to his eyes, scanning the shimmering horizon where sky met sand in a wavering, indistinct line. Around him, 13 other Abrams tanks sat in perfect formation, their massive 120 mm main guns pointed toward Iraq. The engines idled, a low, powerful rumble that vibrated through the desert floor and up through Harrington's boots. Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 2nd Armored Regiment. The Steel Wolves, his command. The radio crackled to life on his hip. Wolfpack Actual, this is TOC, over. Harrington keyed his mic. TOC, this is Wolfpack Actual, send it over. Orders from Battalion, move to grid coordinates Sierra Echo 457319er and establish defensive positions along the valley approach. Verify enemy movements reported by Air Recon, over. Harrington glanced at his map, quickly locating the grid square. A narrow valley at the convergence of the Iraq-Kuwait-Saudi borders. A strategic location that could offer advancing Iraqi forces a protected corridor directly into the coalition's southern flank. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, understood. We're Oscar Mike and 5, out. He tucked away the map and descended from his commander's position into the turret of his Abrams. Inside, the cramped compartment housed 3 other men. Lieutenant Michael Blackwood, his gunner, Specialist Aaron Davis, his loader, and Corporal Thomas Reynolds, his driver. 4 men in a steel box barely larger than a walk-in closet, surrounded by ammunition, electronics, and the massive breech of the 120mm main gun. Saddle up, gentlemen, Harrington announced. We're moving to Stormfront Valley. Stormfront? Blackwood asked, adjusting his helmet. That's not on any map I've seen, sir. Harrington allowed himself a small smile. My grandfather fought in the Pacific. Said every battlefield deserves a name that matches the fight you're about to have. This valley sits between 3 countries, creates its own wind patterns, perfect storm of geography and politics. Stormfront Valley it is, Blackwood nodded. At 34, he was just 2 years younger than Harrington, but already developing the same instincts for combat that had propelled Harrington through the ranks. A former collegiate wrestler from Ohio, Blackwood had the build of a heavyweight and the mind of a tactician. His father, a Baptist minister, had opposed his military career, but had come to accept his son's choice with time. Harrington keyed the company-wide channel. Steel Wolves, this is a Wolfpack Actual. Form up on me, column formation. We're moving to establish defensive positions 5 clicks northeast. Designation, Stormfront Valley. 2nd platoon takes point. 1st platoon follows. 3rd platoon covers our 6. Execute. The column of 14 Abrams tanks began to move. Massive engines roaring to life, treads churning through sand, leaving deep furrows in their wake. Each 70-ton behemoth carried a crew of 4 and enough firepower to level a city block. Together, they represented America's premier land warfare system, the most advanced battle tanks in history. As they traveled, Harrington's mind raced through the tactical possibilities of their new assignment. The valley created a natural choke point, but also limited maneuverability. Depending on enemy strength, they could find themselves outnumbered and outflanked. Sir, Reynolds called from the driver's compartment. I'm seeing dust clouds about 8 clicks northeast. Multiple signatures. Harrington raised his binoculars again. On the horizon, faint brown plumes rose into the sky, evidence of heavy vehicles moving in their direction. Too far to identify, but the pattern of movement suggested an organized military force, not civilian traffic. All wolves be advised, he transmitted. Possible contact ahead. Maintain radio discipline and continue advance. The column pressed on, engines growling across the desert. After 20 minutes, they crested a rise and Stormfront Valley spread before them. It wasn't much of a valley by conventional standards, more a shallow depression between low rocky ridges, stretching about 3 kilometers in length and 1 kilometer at its widest point. But in the flat expanse of desert, it created a natural corridor. Perfect tank country, Blackwood observed, scanning through his sight. Clear fields of fire, good hull-down positions on those ridges. Harrington nodded. And the same advantages for anyone coming against us. Reynolds, position us on that western ridge. I want a view of the entire approach. The Abrams climbed the gentle slope, its powerful turbine engine barely straining against the incline. Once atop the ridge, Harrington ordered the tank into a hull-down position, using the natural contour of the land to conceal the bulk of the vehicle while maintaining a firing position for the turret. Through his commander's sight, Harrington studied the terrain, mentally placing his units for maximum defensive coverage. He could position 6 tanks along this western ridge, another 4 on the eastern ridge, and keep the remaining 4 in reserve for rapid response to any breakthrough. Sir, Davis interrupted his thoughts. Radio call from battalion. Harrington took the handset. Wolfpack Actual. Captain Harrington, this is Colonel Peterson. The battalion commander's voice sounded tense, uncharacteristic for the usually unflappable officer. We have new intelligence. Iraqi Republican Guard forces are moving toward your position. Satellite confirms at least a regiment-sized armor element. Harrington felt his mouth go dry. Numbers, sir? Approximately 60 T-72 tanks, supported by mechanized infantry and artillery. Silence filled the tank's interior as the other crew members processed this information. 60 against 14, more than 4-to-1 odds. Sir, Harrington said carefully, request air support and reinforcements. Peterson's voice turned apologetic. Negative on both, Captain. All air assets are committed to the main thrust north. As for reinforcements, there aren't any to send. The entire division is engaged along the front. Then what are our orders, sir? Delay the enemy advance as long as possible, then execute a tactical withdrawal. Your position is too exposed to hold indefinitely against those numbers. Harrington looked out across the valley, mentally calculating engagement ranges, fields of fire, and withdrawal routes. His company could bloody the enemy's nose, perhaps destroy a dozen tanks, but eventually superior numbers would prevail. Understood, sir. We'll make them pay for every inch. One more thing, Captain, Peterson added. Intelligence believes this force is commanded by Colonel al-Rashid. He's one of Saddam's best tank commanders, Soviet-trained, veteran of the Iran-Iraq War. They call him the Desert Tiger. Harrington had studied the Iraqi military leadership before deployment. Al-Rashid was renowned for his aggressive tactics and battlefield cunning. Unlike many Iraqi officers who owed their rank to political connections, al-Rashid had earned his position through combat skill. Thank you for the information, sir. Wolfpack out. He set down the handset and looked at his crew. Their faces showed the same mixture of determination and concern that he felt himself. 60 T-72s, Blackwood said, breaking the silence. And al-Rashid commanding. Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us, Harrington replied, his voice deliberately steady. Reynolds, rejoin the company. We need to establish our defensive line. As the Abrams descended from the ridge to rejoin the rest of Alpha Company, Harrington considered what he knew about their opponent. The T-72 was the Soviet Union's main battle tank, exported widely to Warsaw Pact nations and Soviet allies like Iraq. It was a formidable machine with a 125mm smoothbore gun and composite armor. Not as advanced as the Abrams, but dangerous in sufficient numbers and especially dangerous in skilled hands. And al-Rashid had very skilled hands indeed. Chapter 3. Elite Formation. Alpha Company assembled in a semicircle at the base of the Western Ridge, 14 Abrams tanks arranged with military precision. Harrington stood atop his command tank at the center, addressing his platoon leaders and senior non-commissioned officers. Gentlemen, we have a situation, he began, his voice carrying over the ambient noise of idling engines. Republican Guard armor is headed our way, approximately 60 T-72s under the command of Colonel al-Rashid. Murmurs rippled through the assembled officers and NCOs. Al-Rashid's reputation was well known among coalition forces. Our mission is to delay their advance as long as possible, then execute a tactical withdrawal. Battalion expects them to reach our position within 6 hours. Lieutenant Michael Blackwood, having temporarily left his position as Harrington's gunner to serve as Company XO during the briefing, studied the topographical map spread across the tank's turret. Sir, what about air support? Artillery? Negative on both, Harrington replied. All assets committed elsewhere. We're on our own. Lieutenant Thomas Doc Morgan, commander of 2nd Platoon, raised a hand. At 29, Morgan was the youngest officer in the company, but his mind worked with the precision of the machines he loved. Before joining the Army, he had been an engineering prodigy at MIT, designing propulsion systems for experimental vehicles. His expertise had proven invaluable in maintaining the company's Abrams tanks in desert conditions. Captain, what do we know about their approach vector? Are they coming straight up the valley floor or trying to flank us along the ridges? Harrington pointed to the northeast entrance of the valley. Satellite shows them approaching from this direction, standard Soviet-style column formation. They don't know we're here yet, which gives us the element of surprise. I intend to make full use of that advantage. Master Sergeant William Billy Rodriguez, the company's senior NCO and commander of 3rd Platoon, nodded approvingly. At 42, Rodriguez was the oldest man in the company, with the weathered face and calm demeanor of a career soldier. He had seen combat in Grenada and Panama, earning a Bronze Star for valor during Operation Urgent Fury. His experience made him a natural leader, respected by officers and enlisted alike. Good, Rodriguez said. Surprise is worth a dozen tanks in the first exchange. After that, it's all about fire discipline and maneuver. Harrington outlined his defensive plan, using the natural terrain features to create interlocking fields of fire. First platoon would take positions along the western ridge, using the elevation to maximize their range advantage. Second platoon would deploy along the valley floor in concealed positions, ready to engage any forces that push through the initial defensive line. Third platoon under Rodriguez would hold the eastern ridge, providing crossfire and preventing enemy flanking maneuvers. Questions? Harrington asked, concluding the briefing. Morgan raised his hand again. Sir, what about our withdrawal route? If they push through with superior numbers, we'll need a clear path out. We'll establish a fallback position here. Harrington indicated a point 2 kilometers south of their current location. Natural depression provides good cover, and it keeps us between the enemy and the main coalition force. The officers and NCOs nodded, mentally rehearsing the plan, identifying potential problems, visualizing the coming battle. One last thing, Harrington added. These are Republican Guard troops, Saddam's best. They're well-trained, well-equipped, and led by a capable commander. This won't be like rolling over conscripts in outdated T-55s. These men will fight, and they'll fight well. Dismissed. As the group dispersed to their respective tanks, Blackwood lingered behind. Jim, he said quietly, using Harrington's first name in the rare moment of privacy, 60 against 14. Those aren't great odds. Harrington studied his friend's face. They had known each other since officer candidate school, had served together in Germany before the Gulf deployment. Blackwood was more than his XO. He was the closest thing to a brother Harrington had ever known. We don't need to destroy them all, Mike. Just slow them down long enough for command to organize a proper defense. Hit and run, that's the plan. Blackwood nodded, but his expression remained troubled. And if they catch us before we can run? Harrington clapped him on the shoulder. Then we'll just have to hit them harder, won't we? As Blackwood returned to his tank, Harrington took a moment alone atop his Abrams, surveying the valley that would soon become their battlefield. The desert wind whipped around him, carrying the smell of sand and diesel. 6 hours until contact, according to intelligence. 6 hours to prepare for the fight of their lives. He descended into the tank where Reynolds, Davis, and his substitute gunner, Sergeant Harris, waited for orders. Reynolds, move us to the command position on the western ridge. I want a clear view of the entire valley. As the Abrams climbed toward its designated position, Harrington contacted each platoon leader, confirming positions and reviewing engagement protocols. The company moved with practiced efficiency, each tank finding its assigned position, each crew preparing for battle with the mechanical precision that came from endless drills. From his elevated position, Harrington watched as his company disappeared into the landscape. The Abrams tanks, despite their size, blended remarkably well into the desert terrain when properly positioned. First platoon's tanks nestled into defilades along the western ridge, only their turrets visible above the natural berms. Second platoon's tanks, under Morgan's command, used the scattered rock formations on the valley floor for concealment, their profiles broken up by camouflage netting. Rodriguez's third platoon mirrored first platoon's positioning on the eastern ridge, creating a deadly crossfire zone in the valley below. Within 2 hours, Alpha Company had transformed from a visible formation of armored vehicles into a nearly invisible defensive network, a steel web waiting for its prey. Harrington's radio crackled. Wolfpack Actual, this is Eagle Eye, over. The call sign belonged to Warrant Officer Jennifer Martinez, pilot of an OH-58D Kiowa reconnaissance helicopter attached to battalion. Martinez was one of the few female aviators in theater, known for her aggressive flying and precise reporting. Eagle Eye, this is Wolfpack Actual, send it over. Visual confirmation of enemy armor column, grid Sierra Echo 49er8325, count 50-plus T-72s, supported by BTR-60 APCs and ZSU-23-4 anti-aircraft vehicles, moving south-southwest at approximately 20 kilometers per hour. ETA, your position now estimated at 3 hours. Over. Harrington frowned. The enemy was moving faster than intelligence had predicted, which meant they had less time to prepare. Eagle Eye, can you confirm command element location, over? Affirmative, Wolfpack. Command vehicles identified at center of column. 3 T-72s with antenna arrays flanked by BTRs, likely Colonel al-Rashid's command group. Over. Copy all. Any sign they've spotted our position, over? Negative, Wolfpack. They're maintaining march formation, no deployment into combat stance. They don't know you're waiting. Over. Roger that, Eagle Eye. Maintain observation and report any changes. Wolfpack Actual out. Harrington switched to the company channel. All wolves be advised. Enemy contact now expected in 3 hours. Maintain radio silence unless absolutely necessary. Final weapons and systems checked now. Around the valley, 14 tank crews performed their pre-battle rituals. Ammunition was checked and rechecked. Fire control systems were calibrated. Engine diagnostics were run. Some men wrote letters to loved ones. Others prayed. Still others stared silently at photographs of family members taped to their stations. In Harrington's tank, Davis methodically inspected each 120mm shell and the belts of ammunition for the coaxial machine gun. Reynolds ran system diagnostics on the Abrams turbine engine and drivetrain. Harris calibrated the fire control computer, ensuring the ballistic calculations would be perfect for their elevated firing position. Harrington updated his map with the latest intelligence, marking the enemy's approach vector and estimated timetable. 3 hours, 180 minutes until they faced a force 4 times their size, commanded by one of Iraq's most skilled officers. His radio came alive again. Wolfpack Actual, TOC, Colonel Peterson requests immediate update, over. Harrington keyed his mic. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, defensive positions established. Enemy contact expected in 3 hours. Company at full combat readiness, over. Standby for Colonel Peterson, Wolfpack Actual. A moment later, the colonel's voice replaced the communications officer's. Captain Harrington, situation update. 7th Corps has engaged heavy Republican Guard formations near Objective Norfolk. Most of our divisional assets are committed there. Your mission parameters have changed. Harrington felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert air. Changed how, sir? Central Command believes al-Rashid's forces attempting an end run around our southern flank. If they break through your position, they'll have a clear shot at our supply lines and rear echelon units. You need to hold that valley, Captain. Not just delay, but hold. Sir, with all due respect, I have 14 tanks against 60. Those aren't holding odds. Peterson's voice hardened. Those are the only odds we've got, Captain. The nearest QRF is 3 hours away, and that's if we can pry them loose from their current assignment. You need to buy us that time. Understood, sir. We'll hold. Good man. TOC out. Harrington sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing the implications of his new orders. Delay and withdraw had become stand and fight. 14 against 60, with no reinforcements coming. Sir, Harris asked, sensing the change in his commander's demeanor. Everything all right? Harrington managed a grim smile. Just a slight change of plans, Sergeant. We're not just slowing them down anymore. We're stopping them cold. Chapter 4, Unexpected Threat. The sun hung low on the western horizon, casting long shadows across Stormfront Valley and bathing the landscape in amber light. Captain Harrington studied the enemy column through his binoculars, tracking their approach from his command position on the western ridge. The Iraqi tanks advanced in textbook Soviet formation, 5 rows of 12, maintaining precise intervals. Behind them came the BTR-60 armored personnel carriers carrying mechanized infantry, and behind those, the mobile anti-aircraft units. It was an impressive display of military might, moving with a discipline that belied stereotypes about Iraqi forces. These weren't the half-trained conscripts coalition forces had encountered elsewhere. These were Republican Guard, Saddam's elite, and it showed in their precision. Harrington lowered his binoculars and keyed his radio. All wolves, Wolfpack Actual. Enemy now at 8 kilometers and closing. Weapons tight. Wait for my command to engage. 14 acknowledgement clicks answered him, maintaining radio silence protocol. He turned to Harris. Target lead tank, sabot round. Target acquired, Harris confirmed, his eye pressed to the gunner's sight. Range 7.8 kilometers. Outside effective engagement range. Hold fire until I give the word. Harrington watched the enemy advance, calculating distances and timing. The M1A1 Abrams could accurately engage targets beyond 3 kilometers with its depleted uranium sabot rounds, significantly outranging the T-72's 125mm gun. He wanted the first volley to hit at maximum effective range, giving his company the advantage of striking first while still outside the enemy's optimal engagement zone. His radio crackled. Wolfpack Actual, Reaper 1, Lieutenant Morgan's voice, commanding 2nd Platoon from the valley floor. Confirmed visual on command element, 3 T-72s with communication arrays, center of formation. Copy, Reaper 1, priority targets once we're engaged. Another call came in. Wolfpack Actual, Sidewinder 3, Rodriguez from the Eastern Ridge. We've got movement on our flank. Looks like they've detached a company to sweep the eastern approach. Harrington swung his binoculars to the east. Sure enough, a group of T-72s had broken from the main formation, angling toward the eastern ridge where Rodriguez's platoon was positioned. A standard flanking maneuver, but executed earlier than expected. Sidewinder 3, engage at your discretion once they enter optimal range. Don't let them gain the high ground. Roger that, Wolfpack Actual. This development concerned Harrington. Al-Rashid was being cautious, sending scouts to secure his flanks before committing his main force to the valley. It suggested he suspected an ambush, despite Martinez's report that the Iraqis seemed unaware of Alpha Company's presence. Sir, Harris interrupted, lead elements now entering optimal range, 5 kilometers and closing. Harrington made a quick decision. The enemy's flanking maneuver had accelerated his timetable. If he waited too long, Rodriguez's platoon would be engaged in isolation, potentially overwhelmed before the rest of the company could provide supporting fire. All Wolves, Wolfpack Actual, fire mission, all tanks, priority targets are lead elements and command vehicles. Fire at will, fire for effect. The western ridge erupted as 1st Platoon's 5 Abrams tanks fired almost simultaneously. The valley echoed with the thunderous reports of 120mm guns, and brilliant flashes illuminated the dusk. 5 depleted uranium sap-boat rounds streaked toward the Iraqi column, crossing the 5 kilometers in seconds. Through his sight, Harrington watched 4 impacts. 4 T-72s erupted in flames as the hypersonic projectiles punched through frontal armor with contemptuous ease. The 5th round must have missed or failed to achieve a catastrophic kill. The Iraqi column halted, momentarily stunned by the sudden attack. Then the valley floor erupted in chaos as al-Rashid's forces reacted with professional speed, tanks dispersing from their tight formation, seeking cover, turrets traversing to identify the threat. All Wolves maintain fire discipline. Select individual targets, confirm destruction before switching. Watch for return fire. 1st Platoon fired a second volley, downing 3 more T-72s. From the valley floor, Morgan's 2nd Platoon opened up, catching several Iraqi tanks in devastating crossfire. The eastern ridge remained ominously silent as Rodriguez's 3rd Platoon engaged the flanking force out of Harrington's line of sight. The radio filled with terse combat reports. Thunder 2, target destroyed. Reaper 4, 2 hits, 1 kill. Thunder 5, engaging BTR at grid point 36. Engaging BTR at... Harrington's tank rocked as Harris fired, the massive 120mm gun sending another depleted uranium dart downrange. Through his sight, Harrington watched an Iraqi T-72 brew up, its turret blown completely off by the catastrophic detonation of its ammunition. The initial exchange had gone perfectly. By his count, Alpha Company had destroyed 12 enemy vehicles in the first 2 minutes of combat without taking a single hit in return. The superior range and accuracy of the Abrams, combined with the element of surprise, had given them a devastating opening advantage. But the Iraqi response was coming. T-72s began firing blindly toward the western ridge, massive 125mm rounds impacting the slopes below Harrington's position, sending geysers of sand and rock into the air. Most fell short, unable to accurately target at this range, but the volume of fire was impressive. Sooner or later, through sheer probability, some of those rounds would find their mark. Thunder 1, adjust position 30 meters north, Harrington ordered the platoon leader. You're drawing too much fire at your current location. As he spoke, an Iraqi round found its target. 50 meters down the ridge, an Abrams from 1st Platoon took a direct hit. The T-72's 125mm round failed to penetrate the Abrams' composite armor, but the impact rocked the American tank visibly. Thunder 3, minor damage, came the report. Outer layer of composite compromised, but we're still operational. Harrington nodded to himself. The Abrams multi-layered Chaubam armor was designed to withstand exactly such hits. But even the most advanced armor could fail after multiple impacts in the same area. Thunder 3, adjust position and continue engagement. The battle intensified as the Iraqi forces recovered from their initial shock and began coordinated counter-battery fire. Al-Rashid was no fool. He quickly recognized the American positions and began directing concentrated fire against them, using the superior numbers of his force to lay down overwhelming volumes of fire. Harrington's radio erupted with Rodriguez's voice. Wolfpack Actual, Sidewinder 3. We are heavily engaged on the eastern ridge. Estimate 2 companies of T-72s attempting to flank our position. Request immediate support. Harrington swung his binoculars east, but smoke and dust obscured his view of Rodriguez's platoon. The sound of intense gunfire from that direction confirmed the report, however. Al-Rashid had committed not just a scouting force, but a major element to the eastern flank, threatening to envelop Alpha Company's position. Reaper 1, this is Wolfpack Actual. Detach 2 tanks to reinforce Sidewinder on the eastern ridge. Move now. Roger, Wolfpack. Reaper 2 and 4 moving to support. 2 Abrams from Morgan's platoon broke cover, turbine engines howling as they raced across the valley floor toward the eastern ridge. They made it halfway across before disaster struck. From the main Iraqi column, multiple T-72s shifted their fire to the exposed American tanks. The valley floor offered little cover, and the Abrams, for all their technological superiority, were outnumbered and outgunned in the open. Reaper 2 taking fire. Multiple impacts. The transmission cut off as a T-72 round found a vulnerable spot on Reaper 2's flank. The Abrams erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off in a massive secondary explosion that sent its turret cartwheeling through the air. Man down! Reaper 2 is gone! Morgan's voice, tight with shock and rage. Harrington felt the loss like a physical blow. 4 men, gone in an instant. The first casualties of what promised to be a bloody engagement. Reaper 4, continue to Eastern Ridge, he ordered, his voice steady despite the churning in his gut. Remainder of Reaper elements, provide covering fire for Reaper 4. The surviving Abrams accelerated, zigzagging across the valley floor as Morgan's remaining tanks laid down suppressive fire against the Iraqi position. T-72 rounds kicked up sand around the speeding Abrams, but none found their mark, and the tank reached the base of the eastern ridge intact. Harrington keyed his company-wide channel. All wolves be advised. Enemy has committed major force to eastern flank. Adjust fire missions accordingly. Thunder elements maintain pressure on main column. Reaper elements split fire between main column and eastern force. As Alpha Company adjusted to the new tactical situation, Harrington received another call from battalion. Wolfpack Actual, TOC, sitrep requested by Colonel Peterson, over. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, heavily engaged with enemy armor. Estimate 20+ enemy vehicles destroyed or disabled. Alpha Company has lost 1 tank, Reaper 2, with 4 KIA. Enemy attempting to flank Eastern Ridge with armored company. We are responding. Over. Copy all, Wolfpack. Be advised, QRF still minimum 2 hours out. Colonel Peterson says hold at all costs. Strategic value of your position has been upgraded to critical. Over. Understood, TOC. Wolfpack out. Harrington replaced the handset and turned to his crew. Harris, target those command vehicles. Reynolds, be ready to relocate if we start drawing too much fire. As Harris traversed the turret toward the center of the Iraqi formation, seeking al-Rashid's command tanks, Harrington's mind raced through tactical options. The battle was developing in ways he hadn't anticipated. Al-Rashid had reacted faster and more aggressively than expected, committing significant forces to a flanking maneuver that threatened to unravel Alpha Company's carefully planned defense. If Rodriguez's platoon couldn't hold the eastern ridge, the entire defensive position would collapse. The Iraqis would gain the high ground and rain fire down on the valley floor, catching Morgan's platoon in a deadly crossfire. Harrington faced a command decision: maintain his current position with a clear view of the battlefield, or relocate to the threatened eastern flank, where his presence might bolster the defense. Both options carried risks. If he abandoned the command position, he'd lose his overall situational awareness. If he stayed, Rodriguez might be overwhelmed without direct leadership support. Reynolds, prepare to move. We're relocating to support Sidewinder elements. Yes, sir. Before Reynolds could engage the drive system, the ridge to their north erupted in a massive explosion. Dirt and rocks showered down on the Abrams hull. Artillery, Harris shouted. They've got our position ranged. Harrington immediately recognized the new threat. The Iraqi forces had called in fire support from their rear elements, likely 152 or 155 mm howitzers. The first round had fallen short, but the next would likely find its mark. All Thunder elements, immediate relocation, artillery incoming on Western Ridge. As if to punctuate his warning, 3 more artillery rounds impacted along the ridge, one dangerously close to Thunder 5's position. The tank disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. Thunder 5, status report. For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then, Thunder 5 operational, minor damage to optics, relocating now. Relief flooded through Harrington. Another catastrophic loss averted, if only barely. First platoon's tanks began moving, using the reverse slopes of the ridge for cover as they repositioned away from the observed artillery impacts. Harrington's own tank backed down from its exposed position, seeking shelter behind a natural berm. Just in time, the ridgeline they had occupied moments before disappeared under a barrage of artillery fire, the Iraqi batteries having found the range. The western sky lit up with explosions, illuminating the battlefield in stark relief. From this new position, Harrington had a clearer view of the eastern ridge where Rodriguez's platoon fought desperately against the flanking force. Muzzle flashes strobed across the darkening landscape as Abrams and T-72s exchanged fire at increasingly close range. The superior armor of the American tanks was offset by the sheer number of Iraqi vehicles pouring fire into their positions. Sidewinder 3, Wolfpack Actual, status report. Rodriguez's voice came back strained but controlled. Holding, but only just. They've got us pinned down. Sidewinder 1 took a mobility kill, track destroyed. Sidewinder 4 lost main gun function, fighting with cokes only. Estimate 20-plus T-72s engaging our position. 20 against 4, and 2 of those 4 partially disabled. Impossible odds, yet Rodriguez and his men continued to fight, buying time with their courage and their lives. Understood, Sidewinder 3, reinforcements coming, hold your position. Harrington switched channels. Reaper 1, detach your remaining operational tanks to Eastern Ridge, maximum speed. Thunder elements provide covering fire. Roger, Wolfpack, Reaper 3 and 6 moving now. The 2 Abrams broke from their concealed positions, engines roaring as they raced toward Rodriguez's beleaguered platoon. First platoon's tanks opened fire on the main Iraqi column, drawing attention away from the crossing tanks. Reynolds, follow Reaper elements. We're joining the eastern defense. The Abrams lurched forward, its turbine engines screaming as Reynolds pushed it to maximum acceleration. Harrington braced himself against the violent motion as the 70-ton vehicle bounded across the uneven terrain, sand and rocks spraying from beneath its treads. Through his commander's sight, Harrington watched the battle unfold across the valley. The main Iraqi column had resumed its advance, pushing into the valley despite the punishing fire from 1st Platoon. Al-Rashid was committing fully to the attack now, sacrificing tanks to maintain momentum. It was a costly strategy, but with his superior numbers, he could afford the losses. Harrington's tank reached the base of the eastern ridge just as another Abrams erupted in flames halfway up the slope. Sidewinder 2, hit by multiple T-72 rounds that had finally overwhelmed its armor. Sidewinder 2 is down, Rodriguez reported. Crew status unknown. Another 4 men potentially lost. Harrington felt each casualty like a physical wound, but compartmentalized his grief. There would be time for mourning later, if they survived. Reynolds, get us up that ridge. Harris, target any T-72 with a clear shot on our ascent. The Abrams began climbing the eastern slope, its engine straining against the incline. Ahead, the remaining tanks of Rodriguez's platoon fought a desperate holding action, outnumbered at least 5-1. As they crested the ridge, the full extent of the situation became clear. The eastern approach was crawling with Iraqi armor, at least 2 companies of T-72s advancing in echelon, using the terrain for cover. Rodriguez's surviving Abrams had taken hull-down positions along the ridgeline, but they were being systematically targeted by concentrated fire. Harrington's tank slid into position beside Sidewinder 3, Rodriguez's command tank. Glad you could join the party, Captain, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the short-range frequency. Was starting to think you'd miss all the fun. Wouldn't dream of it, Master Sergeant. What's your ammunition status? Down to 30% on main gun, coke still good. Harrington surveyed the battlefield. The 2 additional tanks from Morgan's platoon had arrived and taken up positions on the ridge, bringing their total strength to 6 operational Abrams against what looked like 20-plus T-72s on the eastern approach alone. All eastern elements, this is Wolfpack Actual. Concentrate fire on lead vehicles, create a barrier of disabled tanks to slow their advance. Conserve ammunition, make every shot count. The ridge thundered as 6 120mm guns fired in sequence, systematically targeting the lead Iraqi tanks. The superior fire control systems of the Abrams allowed them to hit with remarkable accuracy even in the fading light. 8 T-72s erupted in flames within the first minute of coordinated fire, creating a wall of burning metal that temporarily halted the Iraqi advance. But al-Rashid's forces quickly adjusted. moving to bypass the destroyed vehicles. "They're spreading out," Rodriguez called, "trying to envelop our position from both ends of the ridge." Harrington saw it too. The Iraqi force was dividing, sending elements to flank the ridgeline position from north and south simultaneously. If successful, they would catch Alpha Company in a devastating crossfire. Sidewinder 4 and 6, reposition to northern end of ridge. Reaper 3 and Sidewinder 3, hold center. My tank and Sidewinder 1 will cover southern approach. The Abrams tanks moved with practiced precision, adjusting their positions to counter the Iraqi maneuver. But the numbers were still overwhelmingly against them. For every T-72 they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Harrington's radio crackled with a transmission from the western ridge. "Wolfpack actual, Thunder 1. Main enemy column has breached our defensive line. They're entering the valley in force. We're falling back to secondary positions." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The eastern flanking force had tied down nearly half of Alpha Company's remaining strength, allowing the main Iraqi column to push past 1st Platoon's weakened defense. "Thunder 1, delay their advance as much as possible. Use hit-and-run tactics. Don't get bogged down in stationary exchanges." "Roger that, Wolfpack. Thunder out." Harrington turned his attention back to the immediate threat. The T-72s approaching from the south had closed to within 1 kilometer, dangerously close for tank combat. At this range, the T-72's 125mm gun could potentially penetrate the Abrams armor, especially with multiple hits on the same location. "Harris, target lead T-72, Sabot round." "Target acquired," Harris confirmed. "Firing." The Abrams shuddered as its main gun fired, sending a depleted uranium penetrator downrange at hypersonic speed. The T-72 erupted in a spectacular fireball as the round punched through its frontal armor and detonated its ammunition. "Good hit. Adjust fire. Next vehicle in line." Beside them, Sidewinder 1 engaged the second T-72, scoring another kill. But the Iraqi tanks kept coming, accepting losses to maintain their advance. A tremendous explosion rocked the ridge as artillery again entered the fight, this time targeting the eastern position. Rodriguez's tank took a near-direct hit, the blast wave washing over Harrington's Abrams. "Sidewinder 3, status?" "We're operational," Rodriguez responded, his voice tight with strain. "Lost external comms antenna and commander's sight is damaged. Switching to gunner's primary." Another artillery round impacted 30 meters away, showering Harrington's tank with debris. The Iraqis had found their range again, this time on the eastern ridge. "All elements prepare to relocate. Artillery has us ranged." Before the tanks could move, a third artillery barrage hit the ridgeline. This time, Sidewinder 1 took a direct hit. The Abrams turret lifted slightly from the hull, then settled back into place, smoke pouring from every hatch. "Sidewinder 1 is hit," Rodriguez shouted. "Catastrophic damage." Harrington watched in horror as flames engulfed the stricken tank. No crew could survive that inferno. "All remaining elements, immediate relocation. Move 200 meters south along ridge. Execute now." 5 Abrams tanks broke from their positions just as another artillery barrage obliterated the space they had occupied moments before. The Iraqi fire direction was uncannily accurate, suggesting they had forward observers calling in adjustments. Harrington's tank skidded into a new firing position, turret traversing to engage the still advancing T-72s. The situation had become desperate. Alpha Company had lost at least 3 tanks confirmed, with nearly 2/3 of the Iraqi force still combat effective. His radio crackled with a new transmission. "Wolfpack actual, TOC, Colonel Peterson demanding sitrep. Over." Harrington grabbed the handset, his voice clipped with tension. "TOC, Wolfpack actual, situation critical. Enemy has breached western defensive line and is pressing heavy attack on eastern ridge. Alpha Company has lost minimum 3 tanks, possibly more. Enemy strength remains superior. Request immediate air support or reinforcement. Over." A long pause followed. Then, "Wolfpack actual, stand by for Colonel Peterson." The colonel's voice came through a moment later, the connection scratchy with interference. "Captain Harrington, I understand your situation. 7 Corps still heavily engaged at Objective Norfolk. No assets available for immediate support." Harrington felt a surge of frustration. "Sir, we're being overrun here. My company is down by at least 25% strength. The enemy has at least 40 operational tanks still in the fight. We need support." "Negative on support, Captain. but your mission parameters have changed again. Harrington waited, expecting orders to withdraw. What came instead shocked him. Central Command has identified Colonel al-Rashid's force as carrying chemical weapons, Captain. Intelligence confirms mustard gas and possibly sarin warheads on their support vehicles. If they break through to our rear areas, casualties could be in the thousands. The implications hit Harrington like a physical blow. Chemical weapons against unprotected rear echelon troops and possibly civilian populations beyond. The potential devastation was unimaginable. Your new orders, Captain Harrington, are as follows. You will hold Stormfront Valley at all costs. No withdrawal authorized. I repeat, no withdrawal authorized. You must stop al-Rashid's force where they stand, whatever it takes. Sir, Harrington protested, my company is outnumbered more than 4-1. We've already lost at least 3 tanks. Whatever it takes may mean the loss of my entire command. Peterson's voice was grim but resolute. Then that's the price, Captain. Sometimes we don't get to choose the hill we die on. Alpha Company is all that stands between al-Rashid and thousands of lives. You will hold that valley. Harrington closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of the order. When he opened them, his resolve had hardened into steel. Understood, sir. We'll hold. Wolfpack actual out. He returned the handset to its cradle and looked at his crew, their faces illuminated by the red interior lighting of the tank. New orders, he told them, his voice steady. We're staying, no withdrawal. Davis, the loader, exchanged glances with Reynolds. For how long, sir? Harrington checked his watch. Nearly 2 hours had passed since the battle began. The reinforcements Peterson had mentioned were still at least an hour away, assuming they could be detached from their current assignment at all. As long as it takes, he answered. We've got a job to do. He switched to the company channel. All Wolves, Wolfpack actual. Mission update. We have been ordered to hold this position at all costs. Enemy force carrying chemical weapons. Repeat, enemy carrying chemical weapons. If they break through, thousands of lives at risk. No withdrawal authorized. We stop them here, whatever the cost. One by one, his remaining tank commanders acknowledged the order. No complaints, no protests. Just the simple acknowledgement of professional soldiers prepared to do their duty, whatever the consequences. Thunder elements. Consolidate at base of Western Ridge. Reaper elements maintain center valley positions. Sidewinder elements hold Eastern Ridge. Concentrate fire on command vehicles if identified. We need to take out al-Rashid. As his orders were acknowledged, Harrington surveyed the battlefield once more. The valley below was littered with burning tanks, both Iraqi and American. The night had fallen completely now, the darkness broken only by the fires of destroyed vehicles and the muzzle flashes of tanks still in combat. Somewhere out there, Colonel Karim al-Rashid was directing his forces, pressing the attack despite heavy losses. The man was determined. Harrington had to give him that. But so was Alpha Company. And they had something al-Rashid didn't, the knowledge that they were the last line of defense against a potential atrocity. Harris, target any vehicle that looks like a command tank. Reynolds, reposition us for optimal firing angle on the southern approach. Davis, prepare another sabot round. As his crew responded to his commands, Harrington steeled himself for what was to come. The next hour would determine not just their fate, but potentially the fate of thousands. Alpha Company, the Steel Wolves, would hold the line, whatever the cost. Chapter 5, Internal Conflict. Colonel Frank Peterson paced the cramped confines of the Tactical Operations Center, his weathered face tight with tension. Around him, staff officers monitored radio traffic and updated situation maps as reports flowed in from units across the sector. But his attention remained fixed on the communications officer relaying updates from Alpha Company. Wolfpack reports enemy pressure increasing on both flanks, the lieutenant announced. Captain Harrington confirms 4 tanks lost, 2 more with mobility damage but still firing. Enemy losses estimated at 28 vehicles destroyed or disabled. Peterson nodded grimly. The ratio of kills favored Alpha Company dramatically. 28 enemy tanks for 4 of their own, but the raw mathematics of combat remained unchanged. Harrington had started with 14 tanks against 60. Even with stellar performance, the numbers would eventually prevail. Time estimate until QRF arrival, he asked his operations officer. Major Roberts consulted his notes. Best case, 45 minutes, sir, and that's assuming 2nd Brigade can detach elements from their current engagement. Realistically, we're looking at over an hour. Too long. Alpha Company would be annihilated before reinforcements arrived. Peterson had effectively condemned Harrington and his men to death by ordering them to hold their position. The knowledge weighed on him like a physical burden. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted. "Battalion command on secure line 1, General Williams." Peterson steeled himself and picked up the phone. "Colonel Peterson here, sir." "Peterson, give me a situation report on the southern approach." The general's voice was clipped, businesslike. "Alpha Company engaged with Republican Guard, Armored Regiment at Grid Sierra Echo 457319er. Captain Harrington confirms enemy is Colonel al-Rashid's command. Intelligence was correct about chemical weapons capability. Casualties? Alpha Company down 4 tanks destroyed, 2 more damaged but operational. Enemy losses approximately 28 vehicles. Harrington is fighting brilliantly, but he's outnumbered and surrounded." A pause. "Can he hold?" Peterson closed his eyes briefly. "No, sir, not without immediate reinforcement. I've committed our QRF, but they're still at least 45 minutes out. Unacceptable. If al-Rashid breaks through with those chemical weapons, we're looking at a strategic disaster. Every reserve unit is committed to the main thrust. Alpha Company is all we've got." "General, I understand the strategic situation, but I'm sending those men to their deaths." "Sometimes that's the cost, Colonel. You know that as well as I do." Peterson felt a surge of anger. "With respect, sir, there has to be another option. Air support, artillery, something. All air assets are committed to the main front. Artillery is out of range for your position. Alpha Company stands alone." The stark reality hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. Harrington and his men were being sacrificed for the greater good. "Yes, sir, understood. Keep me updated on the situation. Battalion command out." Peterson replaced the handset and turned to his staff. "Major Roberts, get on the horn to air liaison. I don't care what they say about assets being committed elsewhere. Find me something with wings and weapons that can support Alpha Company. Lieutenant Phillips, contact Artillery Command. I want to know exactly what it would take to get fire support to Stormfront Valley." As his staff hurried to comply, Peterson studied the situation map. Alpha Company's position was marked with a blue icon, surrounded by a sea of red representing al-Rashid's forces. The nearest friendly units were kilometers away, fully engaged in their own battles. He had known Harrington for years, had watched him rise through the ranks, had recommended him for accelerated promotion to captain. The man was not just a superb officer but a friend, and now Peterson had ordered him to hold an untenable position against overwhelming odds. The communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, Captain Harrington on the secure line." Peterson took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Harrington, talk to me." "Colonel, situation deteriorating rapidly." Harrington's voice was steady despite the sounds of battle audible in the background. "Enemy has established fire superiority on both flanks. My company is down to 8 operational tanks. Ammunition becoming critical issue." "What's your assessment, Captain? Can you continue to hold?" A pause punctuated by the thunder of distant explosions. "Negative, sir. Not without support. Request permission to execute tactical withdrawal to more defensible position 2 kilometers south." Peterson closed his eyes, the weight of command crushing down upon him. "Negative on withdrawal, Captain. New intelligence confirms high-value target within enemy formation. Colonel al-Rashid himself is directing the attack from forward position. Taking him out could collapse entire enemy offensive." "Sir, with all due respect, even if we eliminate al-Rashid, we're still facing overwhelming numbers. My men are fighting bravely, but this position is untenable." "I understand your situation, Captain. Truly I do. But those are your orders. Hold that valley. Stop al-Rashid, whatever it takes." "Yes, sir." Harrington's voice was flat, emotionless. "Wolfpack actual out." As the line went dead, Peterson slammed his fist against the map table. "Damn it!" Major Roberts approached cautiously. "Sir, air liaison reports all close air support assets committed to northern sector. Nearest available fighter bombers are 90 minutes out at minimum." Lieutenant Phillips followed with his own report. "Artillery Command says nearest battery is at extreme range. They can provide fire support, but accuracy would be significantly degraded. High risk of friendly fire incidents." Peterson nodded grimly. "Keep trying. Find me something, anything, that can support Alpha Company." As his staff returned to their tasks, Peterson stared at the situation map, watching as the red icons representing al-Rashid's forces pressed closer to Alpha Company's position. In his mind's eye, he could see Harrington fighting a desperate holding action, watching his men die one by one, all because Peterson had ordered him not to withdraw. Sometimes command meant sending good men to their deaths. Peterson had always known this intellectually, had accepted it as part of the burden of leadership. But knowing it and living it were very different things. He picked up the secure line to battalion command again. "This is Colonel Peterson. I need to speak with General Williams immediately. Priority Alpha." When the general came on the line, Peterson spoke without preamble. "Sir, I'm formally requesting permission to authorize Captain Harrington to execute a tactical withdrawal from his current position. My staff confirms no support assets available within actionable time frame. We are effectively sacrificing Alpha Company for no strategic gain." General Williams' voice was cold. "Request denied, Colonel. Alpha Company will hold their position as ordered. Those chemical weapons cannot reach our rear areas. The sacrifice of one company is acceptable if it saves thousands of lives. With respect, sir, there must be another way." "There isn't, Colonel. Not with the assets currently available. Alpha Company holds, that's final. Williams out." The line went dead, leaving Peterson holding the handset, frustration and anger boiling within him. He had just been party to sentencing 56 men to death. The communications officer approached hesitantly. "Sir, Captain Harrington is requesting fire mission data for artillery support." Peterson turned, hope flickering briefly. "Tell him artillery is out of range for accurate support." "Yes, sir. Also, Major Thompson from Intelligence Section has urgent information regarding the enemy force." Peterson nodded. "Send him in." Major Thompson entered the TOC, clutching a folder stamped with security classifications. "Sir, we've completed analysis of satellite imagery and radio intercepts from al-Rashid's formation. We can confirm the presence of ZSU-23-4 mobile anti-aircraft platforms and chemical delivery systems. But there's something else you should see." He spread a satellite image across the map table. It showed thermal signatures of the Iraqi formation engaged with the Alpha Company at Stormfront Valley. "We've identified al-Rashid's command vehicle here." Thompson pointed to a tank near the center of the formation. "But the chemical weapons aren't with the main force. They're here, 5 kilometers east, moving independently with minimal escort." Peterson studied the image, understanding dawning. "He's using the main attack as a diversion. The chemical weapons are circling around to hit our flank while we're focused on his armored thrust." "Exactly, sir. And Captain Harrington doesn't know it. His company is fighting to stop a force that doesn't even have the weapons we're worried about." Peterson straightened, decision crystallizing. "Get me Harrington on the secure line, now." When the captain's voice came through, the sounds of battle were even more intense than before. "Wolfpack Actual. Captain, this is Colonel Peterson. Priority intelligence update. The chemical weapons are not with al-Rashid's main force. Repeat, chemicals moving independently 5 kilometers east of your position. Small escort only." Silence for a moment as Harrington processed this information. "Sir, are you saying we're fighting the wrong enemy?" "Negative, Captain. Al-Rashid is still a priority target, but the chemical threat is separate. I'm dispatching QRF directly to intercept the chemical weapons convoy. Your mission remains to engage and fix al-Rashid's main force in Pau." "Understood, sir. But my situation hasn't changed. Company down to 7 operational tanks now. Ammunition critical on most vehicles. We can't hold much longer." Peterson took a deep breath, making the decision he should have made an hour ago. "New orders, Captain. Maintain contact with enemy, but execute fighting withdrawal to Rally Point Bravo. Draw al-Rashid's force after you, away from the chemical weapons convoy. QRF will intercept and neutralize the chemical threat, then reinforce your position." "Rally Point Bravo. Fighting withdrawal. Copy all, sir." "Harrington," Peterson added, his voice softer. "I'm sorry I put you and your men in this position. Get as many of them out as you can." "We'll do our job, sir. Wolfpack Actual out." As the line went dead, Peterson turned to his staff. "Major Roberts, redirect QRF to these coordinates. Priority mission is neutralizing chemical weapons convoy. Lieutenant Phillips, I want artillery support at Rally Point Bravo, maximum coverage. Let's give Alpha Company something to fall back to." For the first time in hours, Peterson felt a glimmer of hope. Alpha Company might still be saved and the chemical threat neutralized. All because of the courage and sacrifice of Harrington and his men, who had held against impossible odds long enough for intelligence to identify the real threat. But the cost had been high, too high, and it wasn't over yet. At the eastern ridge of Stormfront Valley, Captain James Harrington lowered the radio handset, his mind racing. "New orders, fighting withdrawal to Rally Point Bravo. After 2 hours of desperate combat, after losing nearly half his company, they were finally being allowed to pull back." But a withdrawal under fire was one of the most dangerous military maneuvers possible, especially when outnumbered. Al-Rashid's forces would press them relentlessly, sensing weakness, trying to turn withdrawal into rout. All Wolves Wolfpack Actual, new mission parameters. Execute fighting withdrawal to Rally Point Bravo. Thunder elements provide covering fire for Reaper and Sidewinder withdrawal. Acknowledge. One by one, his remaining tank commanders confirmed the order. Their voices were strained with exhaustion, but resolute. They had held against overwhelming odds. Now they needed to survive. Reynolds, Harrington addressed his driver, plot withdrawal route to Rally Point Bravo, south through the valley, then west across the desert. We'll need maximum speed once we break contact. Plotted and ready, sir. Harris, focus fire on any vehicle that looks like it's trying to pursue. We need to discourage close contact during withdrawal. Understood, sir. Harrington switched back to the company channel. Execute withdrawal by platoons. Reaper elements first, covered by Thunder and Sidewinder. Fall back in bounds, maintain suppressive fire, move now. In the valley below, Morgan's two remaining operational tanks began backing away from their positions, turrets still facing the enemy, firing as they withdrew. The night was illuminated by muzzle flashes and the burning hulks of destroyed vehicles, casting everything in a hellish orange glow. Thunder elements increase rate of fire. Give Reaper covering fire. First platoon's tanks, positioned along the western ridge, opened up with a barrage that momentarily drove back the advancing Iraqi forces. Under this covering fire, Morgan's tanks reached the southern end of the valley and began their withdrawal toward Rally Point Bravo. Sidewinder elements, begin your withdrawal. My tank will provide covering fire. Rodriguez's three remaining tanks, one immobilized but still able to fire, two fully operational, began pulling back from the eastern ridge. The damaged tank moved painfully slowly, its broken track forcing it to pivot and drag itself backward. Sidewinder 2 cannot maintain withdrawal speed, Rodriguez reported, track completely severed. Harrington made a quick decision. Abandon vehicle, crew to transfer to Sidewinder 3, destroy weapon systems before leaving. Copy that, Wolfpack. Executing now. Through his thermal sight, Harrington watched as the crew of the damaged Abrams scrambled out of their hatches and ran toward Rodriguez's tank. Standard procedure called for destroying abandoned equipment to prevent capture, but there was no time for a thorough demolition. The crew would have set the automatic fire suppression system to discharge, flooding the interior with halon gas that would render electronics temporarily inoperable and remove the breech block from the main gun. As the last crewman reached Rodriguez's tank, Iraqi fire found the abandoned Abrams. A T-72 round struck it directly in the turret ring, igniting the remaining ammunition in a catastrophic explosion that sent debris flying in all directions. Sidewinder 2 crew safely aboard, Rodriguez confirmed, continuing withdrawal. Harrington's tank remained on the ridge, providing covering fire as the rest of 3rd Platoon withdrew. T-72s were advancing up the eastern slope now, sensing the American withdrawal and pressing their advantage. Thunder 1 status? 5 operational tanks, withdrawing along western ridge. Enemy pursuing, approximately 15 T-72s still combat effective on this flank. 15 on the west, at least 20 on the east. Despite the heavy losses Alpha Company had inflicted, al-Rashid still commanded superior numbers. Continue withdrawal as planned. My tank moving now. Harrington ordered Reynolds to back the Abrams down from its ridgeline position. The massive vehicle responded smoothly, despite the hours of continuous combat. As they reached the base of the ridge, Reynolds pivoted the tank and began moving forward toward the southern exit of the valley. The radio crackled with a new transmission. Wolfpack Actual, Thunder 1, enemy force has split. Main element continuing pursuit, but at least 10 vehicles breaking off eastward. Looks like they're heading toward the chemical weapons convoy Colonel Peterson mentioned. Al-Rashid was adapting to the changing situation, diverting forces to protect his valuable cargo. Harrington couldn't allow that. All Wolves, adjust withdrawal route. We need to delay that eastward element. Thunder Platoon, continue south toward Rally Point Bravo. Remaining elements form on my tank. We're going to intercept the enemy detachment. It was a risky move, splitting his already outnumbered force, but the strategic imperative was clear. The chemical weapons posed a greater threat than al-Rashid's tanks. They had to buy time for the QRF to intercept the convoy. Reynolds, change course, northeast heading, maximum speed. The Abrams surged forward, its turbine engine howling as Reynolds pushed it to its operational limit. Around them, the remaining tanks of 2nd and 3rd platoons fell into formation, 5 Abrams racing to intercept the Iraqi detachment. "Contact, 2 o'clock," Harris called out. Multiple T-72s ranged 2,000 meters. Through his commander's sight, Harrington spotted the Iraqi force, 8 tanks moving rapidly eastward, trying to link up with the chemical weapons convoy. "All elements, engage at will. Priority is stopping their eastward movement." 5 Abrams tanks opened fire almost simultaneously, their 120-meter guns sending depleted uranium rounds downrange with deadly accuracy. 4 T-72s erupted in flames, caught by surprise by the sudden attack on their flank. The remaining Iraqi tanks responded quickly, pivoting to face this new threat, their own guns seeking targets in the darkness. "Evasive maneuvers," Harrington ordered. "Hit and run. Don't stay stationary." His tanks broke formation, each choosing its own path, making it difficult for the Iraqi gunners to track them. The Abrams' superior fire control systems allowed them to fire accurately even while moving, an advantage the T-72s lacked. 2 more Iraqi tanks were destroyed in the next exchange of fire, but the Americans took casualties as well. A T-72 round found Rodriguez's tank, penetrating the turret and igniting the ammunition. The Abrams exploded in a massive fireball, the turret blown completely off the hull by the force of the detonation. "Sidewinder 3 is down," Morgan reported. "No survivors possible." Harrington felt the loss like a physical blow. Rodriguez had been a friend, a mentor to the younger soldiers, a rock of stability in the chaos of combat. Now he was gone, along with the crew of his tank and the men from the abandoned Abrams who had sought refuge with him. "Continue engagement," he ordered, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Don't let them past us." The remaining 4 American tanks pressed their attack, determined to prevent the Iraqi detachment from reaching the chemical weapons convoy. 2 more T-72s were destroyed, leaving only 2 operational enemy tanks from the original 8. But Alpha Company had lost another tank in the exchange, one of Morgan's. MBM. Hit from multiple angles simultaneously, its armor finally overwhelmed by the concentrated fire. "Reaper 3 is hit," came the report. "Crew bailing out." Through his sight, Harrington saw 3 men scrambling from the burning Abrams, taking cover behind the hull as ammunition began cooking off inside. "Thunder 1, can you reach those men?" "Negative, Wolfpack. We're fully engaged with pursuing forces to the south. Cannot divert." Harrington made another hard decision. "My tank will recover survivors. Remaining elements continue to engage enemy detachment." "Sir," Harris protested, "we're exposing ourselves to enemy fire." "Those are our men out there, Sergeant. We're getting them." Reynolds guided the Abrams toward the burning tank, using the smoke for concealment. As they approached, Harrington could see the 3 survivors more clearly, Morgan himself and 2 of his crewmen, one clearly wounded and being supported by the others. "Davis, prepare to receive casualties. Reynolds, bring us alongside the wreck. Use it for cover." The Abrams maneuvered into position beside the burning tank. Harrington opened his commander's hatch and waved to the stranded men. "Lieutenant, over here!" Morgan saw him and began moving toward Harrington's tank, half dragging his wounded crewman. Iraqi fire kicked up sand around them as T-72s spotted the rescue attempt. "Harris, suppressive fire on those T-72s." The Abrams' main gun roared, sending a sabot round directly into one of the Iraqi tanks, destroying it instantly. The coaxial machine gun chattered, laying down a barrage that forced the remaining T-72 to seek cover. Morgan reached the side of Harrington's tank, his face blackened with soot, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Captain, Johnson's hit bad." Harrington helped them climb onto the hull of his Abrams. Davis emerged from the loader's hatch to assist, pulling the wounded soldier into the tank's interior. There was barely room for the extra men, but they'd manage. "Reynolds, get us out of here. Fall back to Rally Point Bravo, maximum speed." The Abrams accelerated away from the burning wreck, rejoining the withdrawal toward the rally point. The remaining 2 tanks of Alpha Company followed, having successfully delayed the Iraqi detachment from reaching the chemical weapons convoy. "All Wolves, Wolfpack actual. Continue withdrawal to Rally Point Bravo. Mission accomplished on delaying enemy eastward movement." As his tank raced across the desert, Harrington took stock of their situation. Of his original 14 tanks, only 3 remained operational, 11 destroyed or abandoned, along with at least 30 men killed or missing. The cost had been staggering. But they had held Stormfront Valley for nearly 3 hours against a vastly superior force. They had inflicted disproportionate casualties on the enemy, destroying at least 35 tanks by his count. Most importantly, they had identified and delayed the chemical weapons threat, giving the QRF time to intercept it. Small victories, purchased with blood and courage. His radio crackled with a new transmission. Wolfpack Actual, TOC, QRF reports successful intercept of chemical weapons convoy. All WMD assets neutralized or captured. Enemy escort destroyed. Well done, Alpha Company. Despite his exhaustion, despite the losses, Harrington felt a surge of savage satisfaction. They had accomplished their mission. The chemical weapons would not reach their targets. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, copy all, proceeding to Rally Point Bravo with 3 operational tanks. Request immediate medical evacuation for wounded. Medical evacuation inbound, Wolfpack. ETA 10 minutes to Rally Point Bravo. Colonel Peterson sends his congratulations and his thanks. Harrington didn't respond to that. The colonel had put them in an impossible situation, ordering them to hold against overwhelming odds. That men had died as a result was something Peterson would have to live with, just as Harrington would. The Abrams crested a dune and Rally Point Bravo came into view ahead. Artillery had already begun laying down supporting fire, creating a barrier between the withdrawing American forces and their pursuers. Beyond the rally point, Harrington could see the lights of medical evacuation helicopters approaching. They had survived, some of them. They had completed their mission. The chemical weapons had been stopped. But the cost had been too high, far too high. As his tank rolled into the rally point, joining the 2 surviving tanks of Alpha Company, Harrington finally allowed himself to feel the weight of command, the burden of the lives lost under his orders. In the morning, he would write letters to families, trying to explain why their sons, husbands, and fathers weren't coming home. How could he tell them their loved ones had died in a battle that officially never happened, in a valley not marked on any map? That was tomorrow's problem. For now, there were wounded to tend to, equipment to salvage, reports to file. The business of war continued, even as its human cost mounted. "Captain," Morgan said quietly from his cramped position in the turret, "thank you for coming back for us." Harrington nodded, too exhausted for words. The Abrams engine wound down as Reynolds shut it off, the sudden silence almost deafening after hours of continuous battle noise. In the distance, the horizon glowed with the fires of burning tanks, American and Iraqi alike, marking Stormfront Valley as a place of sacrifice and courage, a battlefield that history would never record, but that the men of Alpha Company would never forget. The Steel Wolves had held the line, whatever the cost. Dawn broke over the National Armor Museum at Fort Knox, painting the massive tanks outside in hues of amber and gold. Inside the Memorial Hall, Colonel James Harrington sat alone on a bench, the young reporter Todd Cooper having left to make some calls. The night had passed in a blur of memories as Harrington recounted the opening hours of the battle at Stormfront Valley. Now, as morning light filtered through the high windows, he prepared himself to revisit the next phase of that long-ago conflict, the desperate hours that followed their withdrawal to Rally Point Bravo. Cooper returned, recorder in hand, notepad filled with hastily scribbled questions. "Ready to continue, Colonel?" Harrington nodded, his weathered face set in lines of grim determination. "Where were we?" "Rally Point Bravo. 3 operational tanks remaining from your original 14. The chemical weapons convoy had been intercepted by the QRF." "Ah, yes." Harrington's blue eyes clouded with memory. "Rally Point Bravo. That's where the real battle began." "I don't understand," Cooper frowned. "You'd already been fighting for hours." Harrington's lips curved in a humorless smile. "What we'd experienced was just the opening gambit, son. Al-Rashid was playing chess while we were playing checkers. At least at first." "How so?" "He'd sacrifice pawns to reveal our strategy. The real attack was yet to come." Cooper leaned forward, sensing the story's momentum building. "What happened next?" Harrington closed his eyes, transporting himself back 30 years to the blood and sand of Rally Point Bravo. February 1991, the Kuwait-Saudi border region. The stars were fading from the desert sky as medical evacuation helicopters lifted off from Rally Point Bravo, carrying the wounded men of Alpha Company to field hospitals behind the lines. Captain James Harrington watched them go, his exhausted mind cataloging the cost of the night's battle. 11 tanks destroyed, 32 men killed or wounded out of his original 63. The 3 surviving Abrams tanks, Harrington's command vehicle, Lieutenant Thomas Morgan's, and one from 1st Platoon, commanded by Sergeant Jackson, sat in a defensive triangle around the rally point. Their engines idled, ready to move at a moment's notice. The battle was far from over. Harrington stood atop his tank, binoculars raised, scanning the northern horizon where occasional flashes of light marked ongoing engagements between coalition and Iraqi forces. The main thrust of the ground war was proceeding according to plan, but here in the southern sector, the unexpected appearance of Colonel al-Rashid's forces had created a dangerous situation. "Captain," Lieutenant Morgan approached, his face streaked with soot and dried blood from a gash above his eye that medics had hastily bandaged. At 29, the MIT-educated tank commander looked like he had aged a decade in the past 12 hours. "Ammunition report from the surviving tanks." Harrington lowered his binoculars. "Give it to me straight, Doc." Morgan grimaced at the nickname that had followed him from engineering school. "It's not good. My tank has 12 main gun rounds remaining, mostly heat. Sergeant Jackson reports 18 mixed load. Your tank has 16 sabot rounds, upgraded heat." Harrington did the mental math. 46 rounds total among 3 tanks. In a sustained engagement, they'd exhaust their ammunition in minutes. What about machine gun ammunition? Fuel status? Better news there. All tanks report at least 60% fuel reserves. Machine gun ammunition at or above 70% capacity. Harrington nodded. They could maneuver and engage infantry or soft targets, but against armor, their options were limited. "Any word from battalion on resupply?" Morgan shook his head. "TOC reports all supply convoys committed to supporting the main thrust. Colonel Peterson is trying to divert resources our way, but it could be hours. Hours they might not have." Satellite imagery and scout reports indicated al-Rashid's remaining forces, still numbering at least 25 operational tanks, had withdrawn to a position 10 kilometers northeast of Rally Point Bravo. They were refueling, rearming, and reorganizing for a counterattack. What about reinforcements? QRF is still securing the chemical weapons convoy. No ETA on when they might link up with our position. Harrington surveyed the terrain around Rally Point Bravo. Unlike Stormfront Valley with its ridgelines and natural choke points, this area was flat desert with scattered rock formations and shallow wadis, dry riverbeds that offered minimal cover. Not ideal defensive terrain for 3 tanks against 25. "We need to reposition," he decided. "This ground doesn't favor the defender." Morgan studied the featureless landscape. "Not many options within our operational radius, sir." Harrington unfolded his map, tracing possible routes with his finger. 10 kilometers to the west, a series of rocky outcroppings provided better defensive positions, but moving there would take them further from potential reinforcement. To the east, the terrain dropped into a broad depression that would leave them vulnerable to observation and long-range fire. South, he decided finally. There's a dried riverbed system 5 kilometers south that feeds into a narrow canyon. Better cover, and it keeps us between al-Rashid and the main coalition force. Morgan examined the map coordinates. That position could turn into a trap if they outflank us. "Every position's a potential trap when you're outnumbered 8-1, Harrington replied grimly. "But the riverbed gives us cover for movement and limited protection from direct fire. We can set up a mobile defense, use our speed advantage." The Abrams turbine engine and advanced suspension gave it significantly better mobility than the T-72, especially in rough terrain. If they could draw al-Rashid's force into the riverbed system, they might be able to execute hit-and-run attacks without being pinned down. "I'll inform Sergeant Jackson," Morgan nodded, turning to go. "Doc," Harrington called after him, "how are your men holding up?" Morgan paused, considering the question. "They're exhausted, scared, angry, but still in the fight, especially after we got confirmation about the chemical weapons. Knowing what would have happened if those had gotten through, it gives meaning to what we've lost." Harrington understood. The abstract concept of duty was a poor comfort when watching friends die, but knowing those deaths prevented a larger atrocity provided some measure of solace. "Get some rest while you can. We move in 30 minutes. As Morgan returned to his tank, Harrington keyed his radio. "TOC, Wolfpack Actual. Request satellite update on enemy position and movement." After a brief pause, the response came. "Wolfpack Actual, TOC. Satellite confirms approximately 25 armored vehicles at grid Sierra Echo 495367, stationary at present, likely refueling and rearming. No indication of immediate movement, but thermal signatures suggest engines being maintained at operational temperature." They were preparing to move out, then the question was when and in what direction. "Copy all, TOC. Alpha Company repositioning to grid Sierra Echo 472289. Request immediate notification of any enemy movement." "Understood, Wolfpack." Be advised, Colonel Peterson has authorized artillery support package from Battery Charlie, 3rd Battalion, 20th Field Artillery. Fire mission data being transmitted to your position now. That was good news. The M109 self-propelled howitzers of Battery Charlie could provide crucial fire support, helping to even the odds against al-Rashid's numerically superior force. Roger that, TOC. We'll input fire mission data before moving out. Wolfpack actual out. Harrington descended into his tank, where Corporal Reynolds and Specialist Davis were catching brief moments of sleep in their cramped stations. The 4th crewman, Sergeant Harris, maintained watch through the gunner's sight. Harris, how's visibility? Clear in all quadrants, sir. No movement detected within 5 kilometers. Good. Wake the others. We're moving in 20 minutes. While the crew prepared for movement, Harrington studied the artillery fire mission data transmitted from TOC. Battery Charlie had programmed fire missions for likely enemy approach routes, with concentration points designated Alpha through Echo. If al-Rashid's force appeared at any of those points, Harrington could call down artillery with a simple radio command. It wasn't much, but combined with careful use of terrain and their remaining ammunition, it might be enough to delay the enemy until reinforcements arrived. 20 minutes later, 3 Abrams tanks formed a column and moved south toward the riverbed system, maintaining tactical spacing and alternating hull-down positions to provide covering fire for movement. The morning sun beat down on their steel hulls, interior temperatures rising despite environmental control systems working at maximum capacity. They reached the riverbed without incident, the dry watercourse cutting a winding path through the desert floor, its banks rising 2 to 3 meters on either side. The main channel was wide enough for tank movement, though the soft sand required careful driving to avoid becoming bogged down. Harrington directed his tanks to take up positions at intervals along the riverbed, using the natural contours for hull-down concealment. From these positions, they could engage enemy forces approaching from the north while maintaining the ability to withdraw deeper into the system if pressed. All elements, maintain radio discipline. Report any contact immediately. Conserve ammunition, no shots beyond confirmed effective range. With defensive positions established, there was nothing to do but wait. Harrington allowed his crew to rotate rest periods, 2 men alert at all times while the others caught what sleep they could in their cramped stations. He himself remained at the commander's position, scanning the northern approaches through his thermal sight, mind racing through tactical scenarios. Al-Rashid was a formidable opponent, as the previous night's battle had proven. The Iraqi colonel understood mobile warfare and combined arms tactics, using his superior numbers with skill, rather than simply overwhelming with mass. He would have analyzed the American withdrawal, recognized their depleted strength, and planned his counterattack accordingly. The question was whether he would pursue directly, seeking to destroy Alpha Company's remnants, or bypass them to continue toward the coalition's rear areas. The chemical weapons had been his primary strategic asset, and with those captured or destroyed, his mission parameters might have changed. Harrington's radio crackled to life. Wolfpack Actual, TOC, satellite shows enemy force moving out from holding position, heading southwest at approximately 20 kilometers per hour. Estimate 40 minutes to your position if they maintain current course and speed. Southwest, directly toward Rally Point Bravo, where Alpha Company had been positioned earlier. Al-Rashid didn't yet know they had relocated. Copy all, TOC. Maintain observation and report any course changes. Wolfpack Actual out. Harrington switched to his company channel. All elements be advised. Enemy force approaching from northeast. ETA 40 minutes to our previous position. Prepare for imminent contact. Jackson, relocate your tank 200 meters west to cover the secondary approach. Morgan, maintain current position. The defenders settled into watchful silence, the minutes crawling by with agonizing slowness. Through his commander's sight, Harrington swept the northern horizon, seeking the first signs of the approaching enemy. They came 35 minutes later, a cloud of dust on the horizon, then the distinctive thermal signatures of T-72 tanks advancing in combat formation spread across a 2-kilometer front. Al-Rashid had abandoned the Soviet-style column formation, adapting to the open desert with a more flexible approach that would make it difficult to target his force with artillery. All elements Wolfpack Actual, enemy in sight, range 6 kilometers, approaching from 020. Maintain concealment, weapons tight. Let them pass our forward positions before engaging. Harrington keyed his battalion channel. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, request artillery fire mission Alpha on my command. Wolfpack Actual, TOC. Artillery standing by for fire mission Alpha. Battery reports ready status. Estimated time of flight 2 minutes from order. 2 minutes from call to impact. Harrington would need to time his artillery request precisely to catch the Iraqi force in the open before they discovered Alpha Company's new position. The T-72s advanced steadily, their formation tightening as they approached what they believed to be Rally Point Bravo. Al-Rashid was preparing for a final assault on a position he expected to be defended by the remnants of Alpha Company. 5 kilometers in a closing, Harris reported from the gunner station. I count 23 main battle tanks in 6 BTR-60 personnel carriers. Identify command vehicles if possible. Harris adjusted his sight, scanning methodically across the Iraqi formation. 3 T-72s in center of formation with additional antenna arrays. Probable command element. Harrington nodded. Al-Rashid would be directing the attack from one of those tanks, maintaining his characteristic position in the center of his force, where he could observe and react to developing situations. Range 4 kilometers. They're beginning to spread out for final assault approach. The moment had come. Harrington keyed his battalion channel. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, execute fire mission Alpha, fire for effect. Repeat, fire mission Alpha, fire for effect. Copy that, Wolfpack. Fire mission Alpha executing now. Battery firing estimated impact in 2 minutes. Harrington switched back to his company channel. All elements, be advised. Artillery incoming, impact in 2 minutes. Prepare to engage immediately following barrage. The Iraqi formation continued its advance, unaware of the steel rain about to fall upon them. At 3 kilometers, they began to angle slightly northward, realizing that Rally Point Bravo was unoccupied. Al-Rashid was adapting to the unexpected development, beginning a search pattern to locate the missing American force. He never got the chance to complete it. 2 minutes after Harrington's call, the desert north of their position erupted in a series of massive explosions as Battery Charlie's 155mm shells found their targets. Earth and fire fountained into the sky, obscuring visibility momentarily as the barrage walked across the Iraqi formation. When the dust began to clear, the impact was evident. At least 5 T-72s lay shattered or burning across the desert floor. Several more appeared damaged but operational. The neat formation had dissolved into chaos as surviving vehicles maneuvered to avoid secondary explosions from their destroyed comrades. All elements, weapons free. Target damaged vehicles first, then command element. 3 Abrams tanks opened fire from concealed positions along the riverbed, their 120mm guns sending depleted uranium darts streaking toward the disorganized Iraqi force. In the first volley, 3 more T-72s erupted in flames, their ammunition cooking off in spectacular secondary explosions. The remaining Iraqi tanks scattered, seeking cover behind burning hulks or natural terrain features. Their return fire was sporadic and inaccurate, unsure of exactly where the American tanks were positioned. Adjust fire, target those command vehicles, Harrington ordered, as Harris traversed their turret to engage a T-72 with the distinctive antenna array that marked it as part of al-Rashid's command group. The Abrams shuddered as its main gun fired, the 120mm sabot round crossing 3 kilometers in the blink of an eye. Through his sight, Harrington watched the round strike the Iraqi tank directly in its turret. The T-72 slewed sideways, smoke pouring from its hatches, but did not explode. A mobility kill rather than a catastrophic one. Morgan and Jackson were similarly engaged, each targeting one of the remaining command vehicles. Morgan scored a clean hit, his target erupting in a massive fireball as its ammunition detonated. Jackson's round struck a glancing blow that tore away external equipment but left the tank operational. Reload and adjust fire, Harrington ordered, as Davis slammed another sabot round into the breach. Target that damaged command tank before they can evacuate. Harris acquired the target and fired again. This time, the round struck squarely on the T-72's turret ring, separating turret from hull in a catastrophic kill that left no possibility of survival for the crew. 2 command tanks confirmed destroyed, Morgan reported over the company channel. Third is withdrawing behind terrain feature. No clear shot. If al-Rashid had been in one of the destroyed tanks, the battle might end immediately as Iraqi forces lost cohesion without leadership. But Harrington suspected the canny colonel had survived, most likely in the tank now seeking cover. All elements, be prepared for coordinated counterattack. They'll try to fix our positions now that we've revealed ourselves. His prediction proved accurate. The surviving Iraqi tanks began a disciplined response, positioning themselves behind cover while establishing interlocking fields of fire. Several began launching smoke grenades, creating a concealing screen behind which they could maneuver. "They're targeting our position," Harris warned as multiple T-72 rounds impacted the riverbank near their hull-down location, getting more accurate with each shot. "Reynolds, prepare to relocate on my command. Harris, one more round at that third command tank if you can acquire it." Harris swept his sight across the battlefield, now partially obscured by smoke and dust. "No clear visual on target, sir." "All elements, execute relocation protocol, Charlie. Fall back 200 meters to secondary positions." The three American tanks backed down from their firing positions, using the riverbed for cover as they withdrew to prepared secondary locations further south. This leapfrog withdrawal was a standard tactic, allowing them to maintain fire superiority while avoiding becoming fixed targets for enemy artillery or tank fire. As they reached their new positions, the Iraqi response intensified. T-72s began advancing again, now with better understanding of the American positions. They moved in coordinated pairs, one tank providing covering fire while the other advanced, then reversing roles. "They've adapted quickly," Morgan observed over the radio. "Professional response, not what we typically see from Iraqi forces." "That's al-Rashid's influence," Harrington replied. "Maintain discipline, engage only with confirmed shots." Ammunition conservation is critical. The battle settled into a tense rhythm: advance and counter, fire and maneuver. The three American tanks used their mobility advantage and superior fire control systems to maximum effect, striking accurately while minimizing their exposure to return fire. The Iraqi force, though reduced by artillery and tank fire, still maintained significant numerical advantage, using it to probe the American defense from multiple angles simultaneously. After 30 minutes of continuous engagement, Harrington took stock of their situation. His tank was down to 8 main gun rounds. Morgan reported 5 remaining, Jackson only 4. Between them, they had destroyed or disabled at least 15 Iraqi tanks, but at least 10 remained operational, including what appeared to be al-Rashid's command vehicle, now directing operations from behind a low ridgeline northwest of their position. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, request status update on reinforcements and resupply. Ammunition critical, enemy still combat effective with approximately 10 tanks. Over. Wolfpack Actual, TOC, QRF reports 20 minutes to your position. Resupply convoy diverted to support, ETA 40 minutes. Colonel Peterson authorizes Fire Mission Delta to support defensive operation. Over. Copy all, TOC. Request Fire Mission Delta, immediate execution. Danger close. Our position marked with IR strobes. Over. Acknowledged, Wolfpack. Fire Mission Delta executing. Battery firing, impact in 90 seconds. Harrington switched to his company channel. All elements, activate IR strobes now. Artillery incoming, danger close. Maintain current positions. Each tank activated infrared strobes mounted on their turrets, invisible to the naked eye, but clearly visible to the thermal imaging systems used by coalition artillery observers to distinguish friendly forces from enemies. "Incoming," Harris warned as Iraqi artillery joined the battle. Several rounds impacting near their position, showering the tank with sand and debris. "They've got their own artillery support now," Harrington noted grimly. "Reynolds, adjust position 10 meters west. Get us behind that rock outcropping." The Abrams moved laterally along the riverbed, seeking better cover from the incoming barrage. As they reached the protected position, the desert north of them erupted once again as Battery Charlie's howitzers delivered Fire Mission Delta, a concentrated barrage designed to disrupt enemy advance and provide covering fire for friendly forces. The artillery created a temporary respite, forcing the Iraqi tanks to seek cover or risk destruction in the open. Harrington used the opportunity to reorganize his defense, directing Morgan and Jackson to fall back to tertiary positions further south, creating a greater depth to their defensive line. "How many rounds left?" he asked Davis as the loader checked their ammunition status. 7 heat, 1 sabot, sir." Heat. High-explosive anti-tank rounds were less effective against the frontal armor of T-72s than the depleted uranium sabot penetrators they had been using, but at close range, they could still achieve kills against flank or rear armor. "Switch to heat. We'll need to get closer and target weak points from now on." The artillery barrage lifted, the sudden silence almost as disorienting as the thunderous impacts had been. Through his thermal sight, Harrington could see the Iraqi force reorganizing, having weathered the storm with minimal additional losses. Their tactics were changing, fewer frontal assaults, more emphasis on flanking maneuvers and coordinated fire. They're splitting into three elements, Harris reported. 2 tanks moving east, 3 west, remainder maintaining center position. Classic envelopment strategy. Fix the enemy frontally while moving forces to attack from multiple directions simultaneously. With only 3 tanks, Alpha Company couldn't cover all approaches effectively. Morgan, shift your position to counter eastern movement. Jackson, western approach. My tank will maintain center coverage. Prioritize flanking elements. We can't allow them to envelop our position. The American tanks adjusted, spreading themselves dangerously thin to counter the Iraqi maneuver. Each now faced multiple opponents without supporting fire from their comrades. Contact east, Morgan's voice crackled over the radio. 2 T-72s approaching, range 1,000 meters. Contact west, Jackson echoed moments later. 3 tanks using terrain for cover, range 1,200 meters. Center force advancing, Harris confirmed. 5 tanks in staggered formation, range 1,800 meters and closing. Surrounded and outnumbered, with ammunition nearly exhausted, the situation had deteriorated from difficult to desperate. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, need immediate update on QRF status. We are surrounded and critically low on ammunition. Cannot maintain current position without support. Over. Wolfpack Actual, TOC, QRF reports heavy resistance delayed by enemy blocking force. New ETA to your position, 30 minutes minimum. Colonel Peterson authorizes tactical withdrawal to grid Sierra Echo 46119 or 7 if position becomes untenable. Over. 30 minutes. They'd be overrun long before that if they remained in their current dispersed formation. Morgan, Jackson, fall back to my position immediately. We're consolidating for breakthrough towards southeast escape route. As his subordinates acknowledged the order, Harrington studied the tactical display. The coordinate Peterson had authorized for withdrawal was 10 kilometers southeast, open desert with minimal cover, but offering a direct line toward the main coalition force. If they could break through the eastern element of al-Rashid's force, they might reach it. Harris, target lead tank of center force. Reynolds, prepare for maximum speed once Morgan and Jackson reach our position. The Abrams main gun thundered, sending a heat round toward the advancing Iraqi tanks. The shot struck true, impacting the lead T-72's turret, but failed to achieve a catastrophic kill. Smoke poured from the damaged tank as it ground to a halt, blocking the advance of the vehicle behind it. Reload and fire again, same target. Make sure it's immobilized. A second heat round finished what the first had started, igniting the T-72's fuel and ammunition in a spectacular explosion that forced the following tanks to maneuver around the burning wreck, slowing their advance. Morgan's tank appeared from the east, reversing at maximum speed into position beside Harrington's. 2 T-72s right behind me, sir, both operational and closing fast. Jackson's tank emerged from the west moments later. Western force closing in, I'm down to my last 2 rounds. Harrington made a rapid assessment. They were surrounded on 3 sides, ammunition nearly depleted, facing at least 10 operational enemy tanks. Breaking through the eastern element, the smallest of the 3 Iraqi forces, offered their best chance of escape. New plan, all tanks orient east. We punch through their weakest point, then make for the southeast extraction coordinate at maximum speed. Use remaining main gun ammunition to clear initial path, then machine guns only to conserve rounds for critical targets. As the 3 Abrams pivoted to face east, the Iraqi forces sensed their intention and began adjusting their own positions to cut off the escape route. The 2 T-72s of the eastern element moved to blocking positions, while tanks from the center force began shifting to provide supporting fire. Target nearest eastern tank, all units fire simultaneously on my command. 3 120mm guns, elevated slightly, acquiring the same target, a T-72 positioned directly in their escape path. Fire! The Abrams tanks fired as one, 3 rounds converging on the hapless Iraqi tank. The combined impact obliterated the T-72, sending its turret cartwheeling through the air amid a fireball of ignited fuel and ammunition. Second target, same protocol. Again, the 3 tanks fired together, destroying the second T-72 with similar devastating effect. The path east was momentarily clear, but tanks from the center and western Iraqi elements were already moving to close the gap. Move now, maximum speed, maintain echelon formation. My tank leads, Morgan Center, Jackson Trail. Reynolds gunned the Abrams turbine engine, the massive tank lurching forward as it climbed out of the riverbed and onto the open desert beyond. The other American tanks followed, forming a rough wedge as they accelerated toward the southeast. The Iraqi response was immediate and intense. T-72s fired from multiple directions, rounds kicking up sand around the fleeing American tanks. Return fire was limited to machine guns now. The Abrams 50 caliber and coaxial 7.62 millimeter weapons chattering as they suppressed the closest threats. Keep moving. Don't stop for anything, Harrington ordered as a T-72 round screamed over their turret, missing by mere meters. Maintain maximum spacing to minimize artillery effectiveness. The three tanks raced across the desert, their turbine engines howling as Reynolds pushed them to their operational limit of nearly 70 kilometers per hour. Behind them, the Iraqi force attempted pursuit, but the slower T-72s quickly fell behind, their top speed of around 50 kilometers per hour insufficient to close the distance. Artillery began falling again, Iraqi guns attempting to bracket the fleeing American tanks, but the speed and spacing of the Abrams made accurate fire nearly impossible. Shells exploded harmlessly behind and between the racing tanks, unable to find their rapidly moving targets. After 5 minutes of high-speed withdrawal, Harrington checked their pursuers through his commander's sight. The Iraqi tanks had given up the direct chase, recognizing the futility of pursuing faster vehicles across open terrain. But they hadn't abandoned the hunt entirely. Instead, they were turning southeast, taking a parallel course that would potentially intercept the American tanks before they could reach friendly lines. "They're trying to cut us off," Harrington informed his crew. "Reynolds, adjust course to true south. Let's see if they anticipate that." The Abrams changed direction, the other tanks following suit. The Iraqi force responded quickly, again adjusting their own course to maintain the potential interception. "Al-Rashid's no fool," Harrington muttered. "He's predicting our movements too accurately." "Could they be tracking our radio transmissions?" Harris suggested. "Direction finding our signals?" It was possible. The Iraqi military had Soviet-supplied radio direction finding equipment that could potentially track coalition transmissions, especially if they were frequent or prolonged. "All elements maintain radio silence except for emergencies. Use visual signals for maneuvering." Harrington studied his map, considering options. The southeast route toward main coalition forces was now potentially compromised. Moving due south would eventually reach friendly lines, but the terrain became increasingly difficult, with soft sand that could bog down even the Abrams' advanced suspension system. Southwest offered another possibility, linking up with elements of the 2nd Marine Division reported to be operating in that sector. The distance was greater, but the terrain more favorable, and it would take them away from al-Rashid's predicted interception point. Harrington made his decision, using hand signals visible to the other tank commanders to indicate a course change to southwest. The three Abrams tanks pivoted again, now racing toward the setting sun. For 15 minutes they maintained this course, the Iraqi pursuit falling further behind until it was no longer visible even through magnified optics. The immediate danger seemed to have passed, allowing Harrington to finally break radio silence for a situation update. "Tosi, Wolfpack Actual, have broken contact with enemy force. Current position grid Sierra Echo 459243, moving southwest. 3 tanks operational, ammunition critically low. Request updated friendly force positions and recommended link-up point. Over." Wolfpack Actual, TTOC, nearest friendly forces are elements of 2nd Marine Division at grid Sierra Echo 447162, approximately 20 kilometers southwest of your position. Be advised, satellite shows enemy force has divided. Main element continuing southeast, but smaller element of approximately 4 tanks pursuing your actual course. They've anticipated your maneuver. Over. Harrington felt a chill despite the desert heat. Al-Rashid had split his force, correctly guessing that the Americans might change course to avoid the obvious interception point. The man's tactical instincts were uncanny. "Copy all, TOC. We'll continue toward Marine positions at best possible speed. Request you inform them of our approach and situation." Over. "Already done, Wolfpack. Marines are sending a reaction force to link up with you. ETA to your position, 40 minutes. Over. 40 minutes. If they maintain their current speed, they'd reach the Marine positions in roughly 30 minutes. But if al-Rashid's pursuit element was closing from behind, the race would be tight. Understood, TOC. Wolfpack out. Harrington surveyed their surroundings. The terrain was becoming more varied, with rock outcroppings and shallow depressions breaking up the flat desert. Potential cover, but also potential ambush positions. If al-Rashid had somehow managed to get forces ahead of them, Reynolds maintained maximum sustainable speed, but be alert for terrain features that could conceal enemy armor. Harris, focus primary attention on our rear quadrant, secondary on flanks. The tank crew acknowledged their orders, tension evident in their voices. They had escaped one trap, but all sensed they weren't yet clear of danger. 20 minutes later, as they navigated around a particularly large rock formation, Harris called out a warning. Contact rear. Multiple thermal signatures, range 5 kilometers. Closing fast. Harrington swung his sight to the rear. 4 T-72s were visible, advancing in line abreast, pushing their engines to maximum in pursuit. The distance was closing. The American tanks, having run at high speed for nearly an hour, were experiencing reduced performance as their turbine engines overheated in the desert environment. All elements, be advised, enemy pursuit force gaining from rear. Maintain course and speed toward Marine positions. The Marines were less than 10 kilometers ahead now, their reaction force presumably already moving to link up with Alpha Company. If they could maintain their lead for just a few more minutes. Incoming! Harris shouted as the lead Iraqi tank fired, its 125mm round screaming over their turret to impact the desert ahead. They're within effective range, Harrington noted grimly. Reynolds, initiate evasive pattern Delta. Don't make us an easy target. The Abrams began a weaving pattern, changing speed and direction unpredictably, while maintaining its general southwest heading. Morgan and Jackson's tanks followed suit, creating 3 independently moving targets that were difficult to track and engage. Another Iraqi round struck close to Jackson's tank, showering it with sand and debris but causing no apparent damage. The T-72s were gaining steadily, now within 4 kilometers and closing. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, under fire from pursuing enemy force. Request immediate air support or artillery. Over. Wolfpack Actual, TOC. No air assets available in your sector. Artillery out of range. Marine Reaction Force is aware of your situation and moving at maximum speed to link up. Over. No support available. They were on their own for the final leg of their escape. All elements. Continue evasive maneuvers. Conserve remaining ammunition for point-blank defense if they close to effective range. The race continued across the desert. 3 Abrams tanks pushing their mechanical limits to maintain distance from 4 T-72s in hot pursuit. The Iraqi tanks continued firing as they came, most rounds missing due to the Americans' evasive maneuvers. But each shot came closer than the last as they refined their fire control solutions. Marine Reaction Force should be visible soon, Harrington told his crew, studying the terrain ahead for any sign of the approaching friendlies. Just a few more minutes. Those minutes seemed to stretch into eternity as the pursuit intensified. The Iraqi tanks had closed to 3 kilometers now, their fire becoming more accurate with each passing moment. Hit on Jackson's tank, Harris reported, spotting a direct impact through his sight. Appears to be mobility damage. He's losing speed. Through his own sight, Harrington could see smoke pouring from the rear of Jackson's Abrams. The T-72 round had struck the engine compartment, damaging the turbine or drivetrain. The tank was still moving, but at reduced speed. Morgan, fall back to support Jackson. My tank will continue forward to link up with Marines, then bring them back to your position. Morgan's acknowledgement was terse, his tank already turning to position itself between Jackson's damaged vehicle and the pursuing Iraqis. Reynolds, maintain course southwest, maximum possible speed. We need to find those Marines now. The Abrams surged forward, leaving the other American tanks behind as they raced toward potential salvation. Harrington felt the weight of command pressing down upon him once again. The decision to split his already minimal force a calculated risk. If the Marines were delayed or mispositioned, he might have condemned Morgan and Jackson to destruction while achieving nothing. Through his commander's sight, Harrington swept the horizon ahead, searching desperately for any sign of the Marine Reaction Force. The desert remained empty, shimmering with heat haze that distorted visibility. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, no visual on Marine Reaction Force. 1 tank damaged, mobility hit. Pursuing force closing on separated elements. Request urgent update on Marine position. Over. Wolfpack Actual, TOC. Marine element reports position grid Sierra Echo 448175, moving northeast at maximum speed. Should be visible from your position within 5 minutes. Over. 5 minutes. Harrington checked his rear sight. Morgan and Jackson were now fully engaged with the pursuing Iraqi tanks, exchanging fire at a range of less than 2 kilometers. Jackson's tank was barely moving, serving essentially as a stationary gun platform, while Morgan maneuvered to provide covering fire. Reynolds, execute 180 turn. We're going back. Sir? The driver's voice reflected surprise at the order. Those are our men back there. We don't abandon our own. Execute the turn. Reynolds spun the Abrams in a tight circle, the tracks throwing up clouds of sand as they reversed course. Within moments, they were racing back toward the ongoing engagement, the main gun loaded with their last Sabat round. Through his sight, Harrington could see that the situation had deteriorated rapidly. Jackson's tank was fully immobilized now, smoke pouring from multiple impact points along its hull. Morgan's Abrams was circling the stricken vehicle, firing its coaxial machine gun at the approaching Iraqi tanks, main gun apparently depleted of ammunition. The 4 T-72s had spread out, approaching from different angles to divide the Americans' defensive fire. It was a professional maneuver executed with precision that spoke to the quality of their command. Harris, target lead tank, Sabat round. Target acquired, range 1800 meters. Fire. The Abrams shuddered as its main gun fired for what might be the last time in this engagement. The depleted uranium penetrator crossed the distance in a heartbeat, striking the lead T-72 squarely in the turret face. The Iraqi tank erupted in a catastrophic explosion, its ammunition cooking off and sending the turret spinning into the air. Direct hit, target destroyed. Switching to machine guns for remaining targets. Harrington's tank closed the distance rapidly, its 50 caliber and coaxial machine guns hammering the exposed sides of the nearest T-72 as it focused on Morgan's position. The heavy machine gun rounds couldn't penetrate the tank's main armor, but they destroyed external equipment and forced the crew to button up completely, degrading their visibility and combat effectiveness. Morgan's status? Main gun empty, coke still operational. Jackson's tank immobilized, crew injured, but alive. Maintain its suppressive fire. Marine reaction force inbound, we just need to hold a few more minutes. The return of Harrington's tank had momentarily disrupted the Iraqi attack, destroying one tank and distracting another. But the remaining 2 T-72s continued their advance, recognizing that the American tanks were nearly out of effective anti-armor ammunition. One T-72 fired at Harrington's Abrams, the 125mm round screaming past the turret close enough that Harris swore he could feel the displacement of air. The Iraqi gunner was good, adjusting quickly to the Abrams' evasive movements. Reynolds' irregular pattern, don't establish a rhythm they can track. The driver responded by throwing the tank into a series of unpredictable maneuvers, accelerating and slowing, turning sharply, then straightening, making the Abrams as difficult a target as possible despite its massive size. Another T-72 round impacted the ground beside them, close enough that sand and debris showered the tank's hull. The next shot would likely find its mark. Then, from the southwest, salvation arrived in the form of multiple thermal signatures cresting a distant ridge. The Marine Reaction Force had finally arrived. 4 M60A3 Patton tanks and 2 LAV-25 light armored vehicles, moving at maximum speed toward the engagement. Marine Reaction Force in sight, Harrington announced over the company channel. Hold on just a little longer. The Iraqi force recognized the approaching threat immediately. 2 T-72s broke off their attack on the American tanks and turned to face the new danger, while the third continued pressing Morgan's position. Focus fire on that last tank targeting Morgan, Harrington ordered. Machine guns, maximum suppression. His Abrams pivoted, bringing all its machine guns to bear on the lone T-72, still advancing on Morgan's position. The combined fire of the 50 caliber and coaxial weapons raked the Iraqi tank, destroying its external equipment and forcing its crew to rely on limited visibility devices. The distraction was enough. Morgan used the opportunity to maneuver his tank between Jackson's immobilized vehicle and the Iraqi threat, creating a steel shield for his stranded comrades. The Marine Force closed rapidly, their M60A3 tanks opening fire from extreme range. Though older and less capable than the Abrams, the Patton still mounted potent 105mm guns that posed a serious threat to the T-72s. The Iraqi commander, possibly al-Rashid himself, assessed the changing situation and made a pragmatic decision. The 3 remaining T-72s began backing away, laying smoke to cover their withdrawal, recognizing that the tactical situation had shifted decisively against them. They're withdrawing, Harris confirmed, tracking the retreating tanks through his sight, moving northeast back toward their main force. Harrington allowed himself a moment of relief as the Marine tanks approached, their commanding officer already communicating on the shared frequency. Wolfpack elements, this is Hammerhead 6, area secure. We've got your back. What's your status? Hammerhead 6, Wolfpack actual. 1 tank immobilized with wounded crew. 2 tanks operational but nearly out of ammunition. We've been engaged continuously for over 6 hours. Understood, Wolfpack. We've got a recovery vehicle and medical team 10 minutes behind us. Hold position. We'll establish a defensive perimeter. As the Marines deployed around them, Harrington finally allowed the exhaustion he'd been holding at bay to wash over him. They had escaped, battered, depleted, pushed to their absolute limits, but alive. Morgan's tank pulled alongside Harrington's, the lieutenant looking down from his commander's hatch with a mix of fatigue and grim satisfaction. That was too close, sir. Much too close, Harrington agreed. But we made it, and we dealt al-Rashid a serious blow in the process. Morgan shook his head. Not serious enough. He's still out there with at least 15 operational tanks, and he came damn close to wiping us out. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. Morgan was right. Despite everything they'd thrown at him, artillery, tank fire, maneuver, al-Rashid had countered effectively at every turn. He'd lost tanks, yes, but he'd nearly destroyed Alpha Company in the process. The battle's not over, Harrington said quietly. He'll be back. As Marine medics attended to Jackson's wounded crew and recovery vehicles prepared to tow the damaged Abrams, Harrington received a transmission from Battalion. Wolfpack Actual, TOC, Colonel Peterson requests immediate situation update. Over. TOC, Wolfpack Actual, have linked up with Marine Reaction Force at Grid Sierra Echo 448175. 1 tank immobilized, crew wounded but stable, 2 tanks operational but ammunition depleted. Enemy force withdrew northeast. Estimate 3 tanks operational from pursuit element. Unknown status of main force. Over. Copy all, Wolfpack. Colonel Peterson sends his congratulations on successful extraction. Be advised, satellite shows main enemy force regrouping at original position near Stormfront Valley. Intelligence suggests they are receiving reinforcements from Republican Guard reserves. Estimated strength 20-plus tanks within 3 hours. Over. Reinforcements. After everything they'd done, all the losses they'd suffered, al-Rashid was about to be stronger than when they'd first engaged him. Understood, TOC. Request instructions for Alpha Company. Over. Return to forward operating base sword for rearm, refit, and medical attention. Marine elements will provide escort. Colonel Peterson wants you and your men back in the fight as soon as possible. Over. Copy all, TOC. Wolfpack Actual out. Harrington replaced the handset, considering the implications. Despite being reduced to just 2 fully operational tanks, Alpha Company was being ordered to rearm and return to battle. The situation with al-Rashid must be even more critical than he'd realized. As the Marine recovery vehicle hitched up to Jackson's damaged Abrams, Harrington surveyed his battered command. The men were beyond exhaustion, pushed to their physical and mental limits by continuous combat. The tanks themselves were showing the strain as well. Fluid leaks, damaged external equipment, worn tracks, and road wheels. But they had survived when the odds said they shouldn't have. They had stopped al-Rashid's chemical weapons from reaching their targets. They had held the line, and soon they would be called upon to do it again. Chapter 2, Moment of Stillness. Todd Cooper stared at Colonel Harrington, momentarily speechless. The old tank commander had recounted the desperate flight from Stormfront Valley and the running battle that followed with such vivid detail that Cooper could almost smell the cordite and diesel fuel. So you made it to the Marines, Cooper finally said. But al-Rashid was still out there with reinforcements coming. Harrington nodded, his weathered face showing the weight of the memory. We'd won the opening rounds, but the fight was far from over. And the worst was yet to come. What happened after you linked up with the Marines? We were evacuated to forward operating base Sword, about 40 kilometers behind the front lines. Sergeant Jackson and his wounded crew were airlifted to the field hospital. Lieutenant Morgan and I went with our tanks on heavy transporters. We were in no condition to drive them that distance. And once you reached the base? Harrington's expression softened slightly, his gaze becoming distant. We had a brief moment to catch our breath, to reflect on what we'd lost and what still lay ahead. Forward operating base Sword sat in the Saudi desert like a small, dusty city of tents, vehicles, and prefabricated buildings. The perimeter was marked by concertina wire and earthen berms, guard towers rising at regular intervals, manned by soldiers with crew-served weapons. Within this defensive ring, the machinery of war hummed with constant activity, maintenance crews working on vehicles, communications specialists monitoring radio traffic, intelligence officers analyzing the latest satellite imagery. Captain James Harrington stepped out of the Tactical Operations Center into the glaring afternoon sun, squinting against the brightness after hours in the dimly lit command post. Behind him, Colonel Peterson continued to coordinate operations across the sector, orchestrating the complex ballet of units, supplies, and information that constituted modern warfare. The briefing had been intense. Satellite intelligence confirmed al-Rashid's Republican Guard unit had indeed received reinforcements, at least 15 additional tanks and supporting infantry, bringing his total force back to approximately 35 armored vehicles. More concerning, the Iraqi commander had established a defensive position at a strategic crossroads 20 kilometers north, directly threatening the coalition's southern supply lines. Alpha Company, or what remained of it, had 12 hours to rearm, refit, and prepare to rejoin the battle. Replacement crews were being flown in for the damaged and destroyed tanks that had been recovered from the battlefield. New tanks were being diverted from the divisional reserve to bring the company back to operational strength. By dawn tomorrow, Harrington would once again lead Steel Wolves into combat against al-Rashid. He walked slowly through the base toward the maintenance area where his and Morgan's tanks were undergoing hurried repairs. Around him, soldiers moved with purpose, few acknowledging his presence. News of Alpha Company's stand at Stormfront Valley had spread through the ranks, but the fluid nature of the broader offensive meant that most troops were focused on their own imminent tasks rather than yesterday's battles. The maintenance area bustled with activity, mechanics swarming over vehicles of all descriptions, tanks, APCs, recovery vehicles, supply trucks. Harrington's Abrams sat in a designated repair bay, its engine compartment opened, the power pack partially removed as technicians worked to repair overheated components damaged during the high-speed flight from al-Rashid's forces. Lieutenant Morgan stood nearby, watching the process with the keen eye of an engineer. Despite medical recommendations that he rest, the young officer had insisted on overseeing the repairs to his tank personally. The wound above his eye had been properly cleaned and bandaged now, but his face still carried the gray pallor of extreme fatigue. "They say it'll be ready by 0200, Morgan reported as Harrington approached. "New tracks, repaired transmission, cooling system. Full ammunition load. Your tank should be operational by midnight." Harrington nodded, studying the damage visible on both vehicles. External equipment torn away by enemy fire, armor scarred by near misses, optical systems cracked or missing entirely. The Abrams was a remarkably resilient design, but it wasn't invincible, and these tanks had been pushed to their absolute limits. "How's the crew?" he asked. Morgan's expression darkened. "Reynolds has second-degree burns on his hands from handling overheated shell casings. Medics say he'll be fine, but they want to keep him overnight for observation. Davis is being treated for dehydration and exhaustion. Harris refuses to leave the tank, says he's recalibrating the fire control system, but I think he's just afraid they'll pull him off duty if he reports to medical." "And you?" Morgan shrugged. "I'm vertical. That's enough for now." Harrington recognized the symptoms of combat stress in his lieutenant's clipped responses and thousand-yard stare. They'd all been pushed beyond normal human endurance, but Morgan had shouldered an especially heavy burden during the withdrawal, protecting Jackson's disabled tank at great personal risk. "Word from the hospital on Jackson's crew? All stable. 2 with shrapnel wounds, 1 with burns and a concussion. They'll recover, but they're out of the fight for now." Harrington nodded, relieved. Sergeant Jackson had been with him since Germany, a reliable NCO with a natural instinct for tank warfare. Losing him permanently would have been yet another blow to the company's fighting capability. "What about the replacement crews and tanks?" Morgan asked, changing the subject. Peterson mentioned their flying and personnel from Division Reserve. 6 complete crews arriving by 1800 hours, 8 replacement tanks by 2200. "We'll have a full-strength company by dawn." "Full strength in numbers," Morgan noted, but green crews with no combat experience against al-Rashid. Harrington couldn't argue with that assessment. The replacement personnel would be trained tank crewmen, but they wouldn't have the cohesion or battlefield awareness that came from actual combat. Against an opponent as sophisticated as al-Rashid, that inexperience could prove fatal. "We'll integrate them as best we can in the time available. Pair experienced NCOs with the new tanks where possible. Morgan nodded, but his expression remained doubtful. They both knew that effective tank crews weren't created in a matter of hours. It took months of training together for a four-man team to develop the instinctive coordination necessary for peak combat performance. Sir, Morgan said after a pause, what's your assessment of al-Rashid as a commander, after facing him twice now? Harrington considered the question carefully. Understanding one's opponent was a crucial aspect of warfare, one often overlooked in the heat of battle. He's methodical, adaptable, and patient, doesn't waste his forces in futile frontal assaults when a flanking maneuver will achieve better results. Uses combined arms effectively, tanks, infantry, artillery working in concert. Most importantly, he learns from his mistakes. Each time we've engaged him, he's adapted his tactics to counter our advantages. Not your typical Iraqi officer. No, Harrington agreed. Intelligence says he was trained in the Soviet Union, attended their advanced armor school, fought with distinction in the Iran-Iraq War. Saddam's regime may be built on fear and political loyalty, but al-Rashid appears to be that rare exception, an officer promoted on merit rather than connections. Makes him more dangerous, much more dangerous, and now he's dug in at a position that threatens our entire southern flank. They fell silent, both contemplating the challenge that awaited them. Al-Rashid, with 35 tanks in prepared defensive positions, would be a formidable opponent, even for a fully restored Alpha Company. Get some rest, Harrington finally said. That's an order, Lieutenant. I need you functional tomorrow. Morgan nodded reluctantly. Yes, sir, after I verify the main gun calibration on my tank. Harrington didn't press the issue. He understood the lieutenant's need to ensure his vehicle was properly prepared. The same drive that kept Harris working despite his exhaustion. Tank crews develop deep bonds with their machines, trusting their lives to steel and circuitry, unwilling to delegate that trust to others. As Morgan returned to his tank, Harrington continued through the maintenance area toward the field hospital. He needed to check on his wounded men personally, to let them know they hadn't been forgotten in the rush to prepare for the next engagement. The hospital consisted of several large tents connected by covered walkways, the entire complex air-conditioned against the desert heat. Inside, organized chaos reigned as medical personnel treated a steady stream of casualties from across the front, mostly heat exhaustion and minor injuries, but with a significant number of combat wounds as well. A harried nurse directed Harrington to a section where several men from Alpha Company were being treated. Sergeant Jackson lay on a cot, his right arm bandaged from wrist to shoulder, an IV drip feeding into his left arm. Despite his injuries, the NCO tried to sit up when he saw his commander approaching. At ease, Sergeant, Harrington said, moving to the bedside. How are you feeling? Jackson grimaced. Like I got shot at by a bunch of T-72s, sir, but the docs say I'll live. Burns on my arm, some shrapnel in my back when that round hit our tank. Nothing that won't heal. Your crew? Simmons has a concussion. They're monitoring him for brain swelling. Martinez took some shrapnel in the leg, but no major arteries hit. Davidson got lucky, just some minor burns and smoke inhalation. Harrington nodded, relieved that the injuries weren't worse. When he'd seen Jackson's tank hit multiple times during the withdrawal, he'd feared much graver outcomes. Sir, Jackson said, lowering his voice, the nurses won't tell me anything. What's happening with the company? Are we still in the fight? We are. Replacement crews and tanks arriving tonight. We move out at dawn to engage al-Rashid's force at a crossroads north of here. Jackson's face fell. And I'm stuck in this damn bed while my men go back into combat. You've done your part, Sergeant. More than your part. Now you focus on healing. The NCO didn't look convinced, but he nodded reluctantly. Yes, sir. Just take care of my boys, will you? The replacements won't know what they're walking into with al-Rashid. I know. We'll do our best to prepare them. After checking on Jackson's crew members and finding them in similar stable condition, Harrington left the hospital and made his way to the base's small chapel, a simple tent with wooden benches and a makeshift altar. The space was empty at this hour, offering a rare moment of solitude amidst the constant activity of the forward operating base. Harrington wasn't particularly religious, but he found himself sitting on one of the benches, staring at the small cross on the altar, mind racing with thoughts of the coming battle and the men who might not survive it. 32 of his original 63 men were already casualties, 14 killed, 18 wounded. Some of the wounded would return to duty eventually, but not in time for tomorrow's engagement. The replacement crews would bring Alpha Company back to full numerical strength, but they would lack the experience and cohesion of the original unit. And tomorrow they would face al-Rashid again, this time with the Iraqi commander in prepared defensive positions, his force reinforced and resupplied. The odds, never favorable, had tilted even further against them. Movement at the chapel entrance interrupted Harrington's thoughts. Corporal Reynolds stood there, his hands bandaged, face drawn with fatigue but eyes alert. "Sir," the young tank driver said hesitantly, "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding, Reynolds. Come in." The corporal entered, taking a seat on the bench across from Harrington. "Medics cleared me for duty, sir. Burns aren't as bad as they thought initially. I'll be ready to drive tomorrow." "That's good news. Harris and Davis?" "Davis is still getting fluids, but he'll be released within the hour. Harris never reported to medical. He's still working on the fire control system calibration." Harrington nodded, unsurprised. "I'll have a word with him. He's no use to us if he collapses from exhaustion during combat." They sat in silence for a moment, the distant sounds of the base filtering through the thin walls of the tent. Vehicles moving, generators humming, occasional shouts or laughter. "Sir," Reynolds finally said, "is it true what they're saying, that we're going up against al-Rashid again tomorrow?" "It's true. He's established a blocking position at a strategic crossroads. If we don't clear it, our entire southern flank is vulnerable." Reynolds absorbed this information, his young face reflecting a complex mixture of emotions: fear, resignation, determination. At 22, the corporal was one of the youngest members of Alpha Company, a farm boy from Nebraska who had joined the Army to see the world beyond endless cornfields. "We hurt him pretty bad at Stormfront Valley," Reynolds said, "and again during the withdrawal. Maybe he'll be more cautious this time." "Maybe," Harrington acknowledged, though he didn't believe it. Everything he'd seen of al-Rashid suggested a commander who grew more dangerous, not less, as the battle progressed. "But we can't count on that. We have to assume he's learning from each engagement, adapting his tactics to counter our advantages." Reynolds nodded, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "I wrote to my parents last night after we got back. Thought you might want to do the same, sir." The simple suggestion caught Harrington off guard. In the rush of tactical planning and equipment preparation, he hadn't thought about personal correspondence. There was a letter to his wife, Sarah, half-finished in his footlocker, but he hadn't touched it in days. "Thank you, Reynolds. That's good advice." The corporal rose to leave. "I should get back to the tank, sir. Harris will need help remounting the thermal sight once he finishes the calibration." "Tell Harris I want him to take a 4-hour rest period once that's done." "That's an order." "Yes, sir." As Reynolds departed, Harrington remained in the chapel, contemplating the letter he needed to write. What could he say to Sarah that wouldn't sound like a potential farewell? How could he explain the intensity of what they'd experienced, the losses they'd suffered, the challenges still to come? In the end, he left the chapel without answers, making his way to the officers' quarters where a cot and a desk awaited him. The small room was Spartan: a canvas cot, a folding desk, a chair, and a footlocker containing his few personal possessions. He retrieved the unfinished letter and a pen, staring at the half-filled page for long moments before beginning to write. The words came slowly at first, then faster as he found his rhythm. He didn't mention the desperate battles at Stormfront Valley or the harrowing escape that followed. Instead, he wrote about the desert sky at night, brilliant with stars unobscured by city lights. He described the camaraderie among his men, the small jokes and shared moments that made the hardships bearable. He asked about their daughter, Emily, who had just started 3rd grade when he deployed. Only at the end did he allow himself a moment of vulnerability, writing, "There are moments here when time seems suspended, when I feel both incredibly distant from and intimately connected to everything I love at home. In those moments, I think of you and Emily, and I find the strength to continue. Whatever happens next, know that you are always with me." He sealed the letter, addressing it carefully before setting it aside for the mail orderly to collect. The writing had helped center him, providing a brief respite from the constant tactical calculations that had occupied his mind since the first engagement with al-Rashid. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Morgan stood outside, looking marginally better than when Harrington had last seen him. The young officer had showered and changed into a clean uniform, though the fatigue remained evident in his eyes. "Sir, replacement crews have arrived. They're being briefed by Battalion S3 now. Colonel Peterson thought you might want to address them afterward." Harrington nodded, rising from his chair. "Thank you, Lieutenant. How's your tank coming along?" "Ahead of schedule. New power pack installed, tracks replaced, ammunition loaded. They're mounting the commander's independent thermal viewer now. Should be fully operational within 2 hours." "And Harris?" Morgan smiled slightly. Finally crashed. Medic found him asleep inside the turret, still holding a calibration tool. They've moved him to a cot in the maintenance tent. He should be good to go after a few hours rest. Harrington grabbed his uniform blouse, shrugging it on as they walked toward the briefing area, another large tent set up with rows of folding chairs facing a makeshift briefing stage with maps and a projector. What do we know about these replacement crews, he asked as they walked. Mixed bag, some with prior combat experience in the initial push, others fresh from stateside units, all trained on the M1A1 at least. The tank commanders have been identified, 2 staff sergeants, 3 sergeants first class, and a second lieutenant transferred from another battalion. The news about the lieutenant gave Harrington pause. Junior officers could be either assets or liabilities in combat, depending on their willingness to learn from experienced NCOs. With al-Rashid as an opponent, there would be little margin for error or ego. Name? Second Lieutenant William Carter. Top of his class at armor school, but no combat experience. Colonel Peterson said he specifically requested transfer to a frontline unit. Eager, but untested. Harrington would need to evaluate the young officer quickly and determine the best platoon assignment for him. They reached the briefing tent as the S3 operations officer was concluding his presentation, describing the general situation across the southern sector of the coalition advance. 24 tank crewmen sat in the folding chairs, their expressions a mixture of attention, fatigue, and nervous anticipation. Captain Harrington will now brief you on your specific mission and the enemy you'll be facing, the S3 announced, yielding the stage. Harrington stepped forward, surveying the replacement crews who would be joining Alpha Company, the men whose lives would soon be in his hands and his in theirs. He took a moment to study their faces, noting the range of ages and expressions. Some appeared hardened by previous combat, others visibly anxious about their first taste of battle. Gentlemen, he began, I'm Captain James Harrington, commanding officer of Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 2nd Armored Regiment. You've been assigned to my unit as replacement crews following our engagement at Stormfront Valley. Before I brief you on our upcoming mission, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Alpha Company has a proud tradition and a strong combat record. We call ourselves the Steel Wolves, and we live up to that name. I expect each of you to do the same, regardless of your previous experience or how long you've been in theater. He paused, letting the statement sink in. The men straightened slightly in their seats, responding to the direct challenge in his words. Tomorrow at dawn, we will engage a Republican Guard armored force commanded by Colonel Karim al-Rashid, one of Saddam's most experienced and capable officers. This will not be like fighting conscript units in outdated T-55s. Al-Rashid commands T-72 M1 tanks with trained crews who know how to use them effectively. They fight with discipline, tactical intelligence, and coordination between armor, infantry, and artillery. Harrington moved to the map displayed on the wall, indicating the crossroads where al-Rashid's force had established their blocking position. The enemy has approximately 35 tanks in prepared defensive positions here, controlling a strategic intersection that threatens our supply lines. Our mission is to clear this position and destroy or disperse al-Rashid's force. We will be supported by artillery, but air assets remain committed to the main thrust further north. So don't expect close air support unless the situation changes dramatically overnight. He turned back to face the men, his expression grave. I won't sugarcoat this. We've already engaged al-Rashid twice, and each time he's proven to be an adaptive, resourceful opponent. The coming battle will be intense, and casualties are likely. But Alpha Company has hurt him badly in previous engagements, and will do so again. For the next 30 minutes, Harrington detailed the tactical plan developed with Colonel Peterson and the battalion staff. A 3-pronged attack leveraging terrain features to approach the crossroads from multiple directions simultaneously, supported by artillery to disrupt enemy observation and communication. As he concluded the briefing, he looked directly at the assembled crews, his voice taking on a more personal tone. Some of you may have heard stories about what happened at Stormfront Valley. Whatever you've heard, understand this. We faced overwhelming odds. We fought with everything we had, and we completed our mission despite severe losses. Tomorrow, I expect nothing less from each of you. He paused, scanning their faces one more time. Questions? A hand raised in the 3rd row. A staff sergeant with the weathered face of a career NCO. Sir, what's our ammunition loadout for tomorrow? Standard mix or special configuration? Good question. Given what we've learned about the T-72's vulnerabilities, we're loading with 60% sabot, 40% heat. The sabot rounds are most effective against frontal armor at range, but if we achieve flank shots, heat rounds are equally destructive, and we want to conserve the depleted uranium penetrators for the hardest targets. Another hand, a young specialist who looked barely old enough to shave. Sir, what about chemical threats? We heard the Iraqi unit had chemical weapons. The chemical munitions were captured by our QRF during yesterday's engagement. Current intelligence shows no chemical capability with al-Rashid's remaining force, but all tanks will still carry full NBC equipment as a precaution. From the back row, a hand rose slowly. Second Lieutenant William Carter, Harrington presumed, young with the polished look of a recent academy graduate. Sir, intelligence reports indicate al-Rashid has established a defense in depth at the crossroads. What's your assessment of the most vulnerable point in his formation? An intelligent question that demonstrated tactical thinking. Perhaps the lieutenant would be an asset after all. Based on satellite imagery and our previous encounters, al-Rashid favors a strong center with mobile reserves positioned to counter flanking maneuvers. His weakest point is likely the northwestern approach, where the terrain limits his observation and interlocking fields of fire. Our plan targets that sector with our strongest platoon. Carter nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer. With no further questions forthcoming, Harrington concluded the briefing. You'll be assigned to your tanks and integrated with surviving crew members from the original company over the next few hours. We move out at 0500 tomorrow. Dismissed. As the replacement crews filed out, Morgan approached with a young officer in tow. Lieutenant Carter, presumably. Captain Harrington, this is Second Lieutenant William Carter, assigned to Alpha Company as a platoon leader. Harrington shook the young officer's hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. Lieutenant, welcome to the Steel Wolves. Thank you, sir. It's an honor to join your company. I've heard about what you accomplished at Stormfront Valley. There was genuine admiration in Carter's voice, free from the false bravado Harrington had sometimes encountered in fresh academy graduates. A good sign. Where were you previously assigned, Lieutenant? 1st Battalion, 67th Armor. Sir, I arrived in theater 2 weeks ago. My battalion commander thought I'd be more useful in a unit actively engaged with the enemy. Harrington raised an eyebrow. He sent you to us specifically? Carter nodded. Yes, sir. Colonel Harrison said Alpha Company had, quote, the toughest fight and the best commander in the division. He thought I'd learn more in a week with you than a month elsewhere. Morgan suppressed a smile at the flattery, but Harrington sensed the lieutenant was simply reporting his former commander's words rather than attempting to curry favor. Well, Lieutenant, you'll certainly get your combat experience with us. I'm assigning you to 2nd Platoon under Lieutenant Morgan here. He'll show you the ropes and help you get integrated with your tank crew. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. As Morgan led the new lieutenant away, Harrington found himself cautiously optimistic about the replacement crews. They seemed solid overall, with a good mix of experience levels and a professional attitude. Whether that would translate to combat effectiveness against al-Rashid remained to be seen, but it was the best he could hope for under the circumstances. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of preparation, checking tanks as they were certified operational, meeting with the battalion staff to review updated intelligence and finalize the battle plan, ensuring all crews were properly assigned and briefed on their specific roles in tomorrow's attack. By midnight, Harrington's command tank was fully operational, its systems checked and rechecked, its ammunition bins filled with fresh rounds. The other 13 tanks of Alpha Company were similarly prepared, lined up in their assembly area, awaiting the order to move out at dawn. Harrington stood in the maintenance area, watching as the final adjustments were made to Lieutenant Carter's tank. The young officer had spent hours with his new crew, establishing rapport and reviewing procedures, impressing Morgan with his diligence and willingness to learn. All tanks operational and combat ready, sir, Morgan reported, joining Harrington. Crews have been fed, briefed, and ordered to rest until 400. Are they actually resting? Morgan smiled slightly. Some are. Others are too keyed up, going over their tanks again or writing letters home. The usual pre-battle routine. Harrington nodded, understanding. Every soldier had their own way of preparing mentally for combat. Some sought sleep while they could. Others found comfort in methodical equipment checks or final communications with loved ones. And you, Doc? Will you get some rest tonight? The lieutenant shrugged. Eventually. I want to review the approach routes one more time, make sure I understand every contour of the terrain. Al-Rashid will have positioned his forces to maximize natural defensive features. We need to identify those positions before we're in his kill zone. Good thinking. Just make sure you're sharp for tomorrow. I need your brain functioning at full capacity. Morgan nodded. I'll get some sleep, sir, after I finish with the maps. As the lieutenant departed, Harrington made a final circuit of the assembly area, checking on each tank and crew. The veterans from the original company were easily distinguishable from the replacements, their faces bearing the unmistakable strain of recent combat, their movements economical and purposeful. The new men watched and emulated them, absorbing the unspoken lessons of soldiers who had faced death and survived. In most tanks, at least one original crew member remained, providing continuity and experience to the reconstituted unit. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than an entirely fresh company facing al-Rashid's veteran force. Satisfied that everything possible had been done to prepare, Harrington finally returned to his quarters for a few hours of rest. Sleep came surprisingly easily, his body claiming the respite it desperately needed after days of continuous stress and exertion. His dreams were a chaotic mixture of past and anticipated battles, the desperate defense of Stormfront Valley blending with imagined scenarios at the crossroads tomorrow. Faces of the fallen merging with those who would fight at dawn. Through it all ran a single constant thread, the presence of al-Rashid, unseen but felt, a worthy opponent whose tactical skill had earned Harrington's professional respect even as they tried to destroy one another. The alarm jarred him awake at 3:30, the desert night still pitch black outside his quarters. He rose immediately, years of military discipline overriding his body's demand for more rest. A quick wash with cold water from his canteen, a fresh uniform, a moment to center himself mentally, and he was ready to lead men into battle once more. Outside, Forward Operating Base Sword was already stirring to life. Soldiers moved purposefully through the darkness, illuminated by occasional vehicle headlights and the softer glow of red lens flashlights that preserved night vision. In the tank assembly area, crews were conducting final pre-combat inspections, their voices low but intent as they verified systems and equipment. Harrington's command group had gathered near his tank, Morgan, Carter, and the platoon sergeants who would lead the company's 3 platoons in the coming engagement. Their faces were solemn in the pre-dawn darkness, each man mentally preparing for what lay ahead. Gentlemen, Harrington began, in 1 hour we move out to engage Colonel al-Rashid's force at the crossroads. Intelligence confirms he's dug in with approximately 35 tanks and supporting infantry. The plan remains unchanged, 3-pronged attack with artillery support, targeting his northwestern flank while fixing his center and southeastern positions. He looked at each man in turn, meeting their eyes. We've heard al-Rashid twice now. Today we finish the job. Questions? There were none. The plan had been thoroughly briefed. Each element understood their role. All that remained was execution. Mount up. Final radio checks in 15 minutes. We roll at 0500 sharp. As the officers dispersed to their respective tanks, Harrington climbed aboard his own Abrams. Reynolds, Davis, and Harris were already at their stations, having completed their pre-combat checks. The interior smelled of gun oil, hydraulic fluid, and the faint metallic scent that permeated all armored vehicles, the essence of controlled violence contained within steel walls. All systems operational, sir, Harris reported from the gunner station. Fire control computer calibrated, thermal sight aligned, ammunition loaded and ready. Engine at normal operating temperature, Reynolds added. Fuel at 98%, hydraulics nominal. Davis simply patted the breech of the 120mm main gun, his traditional gesture of confidence in the weapon system he served as loader. Harrington settled into the commander's position, donning his CVC helmet and connecting to the vehicle's intercom system. Good morning, gentlemen. Ready for another round with our friend Colonel al-Rashid? Ready, sir, they responded in near unison, their voices betraying a mixture of apprehension and determination. As the company prepared to move out, Harrington received a final radio call from battalion. Wolfpack Actual, TOC, Colonel Peterson wishes to speak with you. Stand by. A moment later, the colonel's voice came through the headset. Captain Harrington, satellite update on enemy positions. Al-Rashid has reinforced his northwestern sector overnight, shifting approximately 10 tanks to cover the approach we identified as his weakest point. Harrington felt a chill that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn desert air. Once again, Al-Rashid had anticipated their strategy, preparing counters to their planned attack. Understood, sir. Recommendation? Adjust your main effort to the southeastern approach. Artillery will initiate with smoke to cover your advance there. We're also diverting two A-10s for close air support, ETA 20 minutes after your initial engagement. A-10 Thunderbolt 2s, the tank killers, with their devastating 30mm cannon capable of shredding armored vehicles. That was welcome news indeed. Copy all, sir. We'll adjust accordingly. Harrington, Peterson added, his voice lowering slightly. We've thrown everything we can at this. The division commander is watching this operation personally. Al-Rashid has become a priority target, not just his force. The implication was clear. Destroy al-Rashid, and they might break the back of Iraqi resistance in the southern sector. Understood, sir. We'll get it done. Good hunting, Wolfpack. Teok out. Harrington switched to the company channel, relaying the intelligence update and the change in attack plans. The platoon leaders acknowledged quickly, adjusting their approach routes accordingly. At precisely 0500, 14 Abrams tanks of the reconstituted Alpha Company moved out from forward operating base Sword, advancing in tactical formation toward what promised to be the decisive engagement with Colonel Karim al-Rashid's Republican Guard force. As they rolled into the desert dawn, Harrington couldn't shake the feeling that al-Rashid was waiting for them, had perhaps anticipated this very adjustment to their plan. The Iraqi colonel had proven remarkably adept at reading American intentions, consistently positioning his forces to counter their strengths and exploit their vulnerabilities. Today would be different, Harrington promised himself. Today the Steel Wolves would prove more cunning than their prey. The horizon began to lighten as Alpha Company advanced, the stars fading from the sky as a new day dawned over the desert battlefield. 15 kilometers to the crossroads, 15 kilometers to al-Rashid, 15 kilometers to victory or defeat. Harrington checked his watch. 1 hour until contact. The first rays of morning sunlight glinted off the polished metals in the display case at Fort Knox's National Armor Museum. Colonel James Harrington paused in his narrative, his weathered face reflecting decades of memories as he stared at the 5 silver stars and 2 purple hearts, tangible symbols of courage awarded for actions that official records barely acknowledged. Reporter Todd Cooper waited patiently, sensing the old warrior needed a moment to compose himself before continuing. The story of Alpha Company's desperate battles against Colonel al-Rashid's forces had captivated him throughout their day-long interview. What had begun as a routine profile piece for American Valor magazine had transformed into something far more significant. The revelation of a classified battle that had shaped the outcome of Desert Storm, yet remained unknown to the American public. "You ready for the last part?" Harrington finally asked, his voice steady but quieter than before. Cooper nodded, checking his recording device. The final confrontation with al-Rashid. Yes. Harrington's blue eyes hardened with memory. We'd faced him twice, first at Stormfront Valley, then during our fighting withdrawal. We'd bloodied his nose both times, but he'd nearly destroyed us in the process. By dawn on February 27, 1991, we were heading toward what we all knew would be the decisive engagement. You had replenished your company by then? New tanks, fresh crews? 14 tanks, yes, but only 17 of my original men remained combat ready. The replacements were solid soldiers, but they'd never faced someone like al-Rashid. They had no idea what they were rolling into. And al-Rashid, what was his situation? Harrington's mouth tightened into a grim line. Intelligence reported 35 tanks in prepared defensive positions at a strategic crossroads. He'd received reinforcements overnight and had somehow anticipated our initial attack plan, shifting forces to counter it. How could he know your plan? That's what I kept asking myself. Either he had exceptional battlefield intuition, or Harrington let the thought hang unfinished. Or we had a security problem. But there was no time to investigate. Dawn was breaking, and Alpha Company was rolling toward what would become the most significant and costly battle of our war. February 27, 1991. The Kuwaiti Desert, 15 kilometers south of the strategic crossroads where Colonel Karim al-Rashid's Republican Guard forces had established defensive positions. Captain James Harrington stood in the commander's cupola of his M1A1 Abrams tank, binoculars raised as he studied the terrain ahead. Behind him, 13 other Abrams tanks of the reconstituted Alpha Company moved in tactical formation, their massive turbine engines producing a collective growl that vibrated through the desert floor. The sky had lightened to a pale blue, the stars fading as dawn broke over the battlefield. To the north, a smudge of dark smoke marked the crossroads. Al-Rashid's position, where 35 T-72 tanks and supporting infantry awaited the American advance. Intelligence reported extensive defensive preparations, hold-down positions, pre-ranged artillery, minefields covering likely approach routes. Harrington lowered his binoculars, his mind processing the tactical challenge ahead. The original plan to attack from the northwest had been scrapped when satellite imagery revealed al-Rashid had reinforced that sector overnight, somehow anticipating the American strategy. Now they would approach from the southeast instead, with artillery and newly assigned A-10 close air support to soften the Iraqi defenses. He keyed his radio. All Wolf elements, Wolfpack actual. Final confirmation of attack plan. First platoon will initiate from the southeast. Second platoon providing overwatch from the central approach. Third platoon in reserve, prepared to exploit any breakthrough. Artillery commences in 30 minutes with smoke to cover first platoon's advance. Acknowledge. One by one, his platoon leaders confirmed their understanding of the plan. Lieutenant Michael Morgan commanding 2nd Platoon, newly assigned Lieutenant Carter with 1st Platoon, and Master Sergeant Phillips leading 3rd Platoon. Of the 4, only Morgan had faced al-Rashid before, having survived the brutal engagements at Stormfront Valley and during the withdrawal. Harrington descended into the tank's interior, where Corporal Reynolds, Specialist Davis, and Sergeant Harris maintained their stations, driver, loader, and gunner respectively. All 3 had fought alongside him from the beginning, their faces showing the strain of continuous combat, but their movements precise and confident as they prepared for the coming battle. 10 minutes to artillery preparation, Harrington informed them, settling into his commander's position. Al-Rashid will have his men dug in deep, expecting us. This won't be easy. Never is with him, sir, Harris replied, adjusting his sight. But we've heard him twice now. 3rd time's the charm. Harrington hoped the gunner was right. Alpha Company had indeed inflicted disproportionate losses on al-Rashid's forces in previous encounters, but at terrible cost to themselves. Now they faced the Iraqi commander in prepared defensive positions, the advantage of surprise lost, the element of maneuver limited by terrain and minefields. 2OC, Wolfpack actual, Alpha Company in position for attack commencement. Request confirmation of artillery timeline and A-10 support. Over. Wolfpack actual, TOC. Artillery confirmed, firing commences in 9 minutes. A-10 support delayed due to priority tasking elsewhere. Estimate 30 minutes from your initial engagement. Over. Harrington frowned. The close air support had been a key element of the revised attack plan. Without it, the burden of breaching al-Rashid's defenses would fall entirely on Alpha Company and the supporting artillery. Copy all TOC. Proceeding as planned. Wolfpack actual out. He switched to the company channel. All Wolf elements be advised. A-10 support delayed approximately 30 minutes. We proceed with artillery preparation only. Maintain tactical discipline and fire conservation. This may be a longer fight than anticipated. As the minutes ticked down to the artillery barrage, Harrington studied the tactical display showing the disposition of his forces. 1st Platoon under Lieutenant Carter had moved into position for the initial assault. 4 Abrams tanks in line abreast, prepared to advance behind the artillery smokescreen. 2nd Platoon, commanded by Morgan, held elevated positions that offered clear fields of fire across the southeastern approach, ready to provide covering fire for Carter's advance. 3rd Platoon, led by Master Sergeant Phillips, remained in reserve 2 kilometers back, poised to exploit any breakthrough or reinforce threatened sectors. It was a solid plan, leveraging the Abrams' superior fire control systems and the natural terrain features. But Harrington couldn't shake a sense of unease. Al-Rashid had proven remarkably adaptive in previous encounters, consistently countering American tactical advantages with skillful maneuver and coordinated combined arms. The Iraqi commander would have anticipated this attack, prepared countermeasures, perhaps even laid traps for the advancing American armor. 1 minute to artillery, Harris announced, his voice tight with pre-battle tension. Harrington nodded, keying his company channel one last time before the storm broke. All Wolf elements, stand ready. Remember your training, trust your equipment, watch out for each other. We end this today. The horizon erupted in a series of massive explosions as Battery Charlie's 155mm howitzers delivered their opening salvo. The impact zone, the southeastern approach to the crossroads, disappeared beneath churning clouds of smoke, sand, and debris. Shell after shell pounded the Iraqi positions, the steady rhythm of distant thunder punctuated by brief, brilliant flashes of light. Artillery firing for effect, Harrington confirmed. First platoon prepared to advance on my mark. Through his thermal sight, he monitored the impact area, watching for movement or return fire from the Iraqi positions. The smoke and dust provided excellent concealment for the American advance, but also limited visibility for targeting. They would need to close to within 2 kilometers before effective engagement could commence. First platoon advance. Lieutenant Carter's 4 tanks lurched forward, accelerating steadily as they moved toward the artillery impact zone. The young officer's voice was calm over the radio as he directed his platoon, maintaining proper intervals and speed. Second platoon, establish overwatch positions. Identify targets of opportunity, but hold fire until first platoon makes contact. Morgan's acknowledgement was terse, his 4 tanks maneuvering to elevated firing positions along the central approach. Through their advanced thermal sights, they would be able to identify Iraqi armor, even through the smoke and dust, providing crucial supporting fire as Carter's platoon made initial contact. For 5 minutes, Alpha Company's attack proceeded according to plan. First platoon advanced steadily behind the rolling artillery barrage, closing the distance to al-Rashid's positions. Second platoon established effective overwatch, their gunners scanning for targets. Third platoon maintained its reserve position, ready to exploit success or reinforce failure. Then everything changed. Contact front, Carter's voice cracked over the radio. Multiple T-72s concealed positions at grid point 79 or 3. Through his commander's sight, Harrington spotted what Carter had reported. A line of Iraqi tanks emerging from camouflage positions well forward of their expected defensive line. Al-Rashid had established an ambush position, allowing the Americans to advance into a prepared kill zone. First platoon, engage. Second platoon, supporting fire on those forward positions. 8 Abrams tanks opened fire almost simultaneously, their 190mm bombardment guns sending depleted uranium sabot rounds streaking toward the Iraqi positions. Several T-72s erupted in flames, their ammunition cooking off in secondary explosions that sent turrets cartwheeling through the air. But al-Rashid had more surprises waiting. From concealed positions on the eastern flank, previously undetected by reconnaissance, another group of T-72s opened fire, catching first platoon in a deadly crossfire. Carter's lead tank took a direct hit, the round impacting just below the turret ring. Wolf 1-1 is hit, Carter reported, his voice remarkably steady despite the crisis. Driver injured, tank still operational, returning fire. The young lieutenant's tank pivoted, its main gun tracking toward the new threat as it continued to move forward despite the damage. The other tanks of first platoon adjusted likewise, spreading out to reduce their vulnerability to the flanking fire. Harrington made a rapid tactical assessment. Al-Rashid had drawn them into an elaborate trap with prepared positions on multiple axes that threatened to envelop the attacking force. If they continued the frontal assault, they risked destruction in detail. All Wolf elements, adjust plan. First platoon, execute tactical withdrawal to Rally Point Charlie. Second platoon, provide covering fire. Third platoon, advance to reinforce eastern flank. As his orders were acknowledged, Harrington's tank moved forward to join second platoon on the central approach. From this elevated position, he could better direct the evolving battle and provide additional firepower to counter the Iraqi ambush. But al-Rashid had anticipated this response as well. As third platoon began its advance toward the eastern flank, previously hidden Iraqi anti-tank teams launched a volley of rocket-propelled grenades from concealed positions in a shallow wadi. 2 RPGs struck the lead Abrams, both detonating against the composite armor without penetration, but damaging external equipment and shattering vision blocks. Wolf 3-1, mobility hit, Phillips reported. Track damaged. Continuing advance at reduced speed. The Iraqi infantry revealed themselves too early, however. The remaining tanks of 3rd Platoon immediately engaged the anti-tank teams with coaxial machine guns and main gun heat rounds, obliterating the threat before it could launch a second volley. Phillips' damaged tank continued forward, limping but still combat-capable. Meanwhile, 1st Platoon executed its tactical withdrawal, falling back in bounds with 2 tanks providing covering fire while the other 2 moved. Carter coordinated the maneuver professionally despite this being his first taste of actual combat, his calm voice betraying no hint of the chaos around him. Wolfpack Actual, Wolf 1-1. First platoon disengaged, reaching Rally Point Charlie now. 4 tanks operational, 2 with minor damage, ready to re-engage on your order. Hold position at Charlie, Harrington directed. Reorient to support 3rd Platoon's advance on eastern flank. The battle was evolving rapidly, the neat plan dissolving into the chaotic reality of combat against a prepared, skillful opponent. Al-Rashid had anticipated the American attack, prepared an elaborate defensive scheme with ambush positions and infantry support, and very nearly caught 1st Platoon in a devastating trap. But Alpha Company had reacted quickly, adjusting to the unexpected threat and extracting their lead elements before they could be destroyed. Now they needed to regain the initiative, find a weakness in the Iraqi defense, and exploit it before al-Rashid could reposition his forces. TOC, Wolfpack Actual. Contact with enemy ambush positions southeast of main defensive line. Have adjusted tactical plan to counter. Request immediate update on A-10 support. Over. Wolfpack Actual, TOC. A-10s diverted to emergency tasking north sector. No air support available for your operation at this time. Artillery support continues as scheduled. Over. Harrington absorbed this unwelcome news, quickly revising his mental plan. Without the tank-killing A-10s, they would need to rely entirely on their own resources to break through al-Rashid's defenses. All Wolf elements, Wolfpack Actual. New attack plan. 2nd and 3rd platoons will fix enemy forces on central and eastern approaches. 1st platoon will execute wide flanking maneuver to western sector, attack enemy rear areas. Execute on my command. It was a risky stratagem, dividing his force in the face of a numerically superior enemy. But al-Rashid had committed significant resources to the ambush positions on the southeastern and eastern approaches. If Carter's platoon could swing wide to the west and strike the Iraqi rear areas, they might disrupt the entire defensive scheme. As Alpha Company adjusted to the new plan, the Iraqis pressed their advantage. T-72s advanced from their ambush positions, attempting to envelop 3rd Platoon as it struggled to establish a foothold on the eastern flank. Phillips tanks fought back fiercely, their superior fire control systems allowing them to engage accurately while moving, picking off Iraqi tanks that exposed themselves too boldly. Wolf 3-3, target destroyed. Wolf 3-4, 2 hits, 1 catastrophic kill. The radio filled with terse combat reports as 3rd Platoon blunted the Iraqi counterattack. Meanwhile, 2nd Platoon maintained steady fire from their overwatch positions, their elevated vantage point allowing them to engage Iraqi armor, attempting to maneuver against 3rd Platoon. Morgan directed his gunners with the precision of an orchestra conductor, each tank focusing on specific sectors to maximize coverage. Wolfpack Actual, Wolf 2-1. Enemy reinforcing central sector. Estimate 5 T-72s moving to blocking positions along 1st Platoon's planned flanking route. Harrington swung his sight toward the western approach. Morgan was right. Al-Rashid had anticipated the flanking maneuver, diverting tanks to intercept Carter's platoon before they could reach the Iraqi rear areas. Wolf 1-1, adjust route further west, grid point 462. Avoid contact with those blocking forces if possible. Copy that, Wolfpack Actual, adjusting now. As 1st Platoon swung wider to the west, Harrington's own tank joined the fight directly, engaging Iraqi armor, attempting to press the attack against 3rd Platoon. Harris, his gunner, worked methodically, acquiring and destroying targets with surgical precision. Target T-72, range 2650, sabot loaded. Fire. On the way. The Abrams shuddered as its main gun fired. The 120-meter depleted uranium penetrator crossing the battlefield in a heartbeat to strike an advancing T-72 squarely in its frontal armor. The Iraqi tank erupted in flames, its ammunition detonating catastrophically. Target destroyed. Traversing right. New target. BTR at 2700. Another round loaded. Another shot fired. Another enemy vehicle destroyed. The process repeated with mechanical efficiency as Harrington's tank engaged target after target, adding its firepower to 2nd Platoon's overwatch position. For 15 minutes, the battle raged across multiple axes, neither side gaining decisive advantage. Alpha Company inflicted significant losses on the Iraqi force, destroying at least 10 tanks and several supporting vehicles. But al-Rashid's defensive positions were well prepared, his forces disciplined and determined, and his numerical advantage still significant. Then came the breakthrough Harrington had been waiting for. Wolfpack Actual, Wolf 1-1. We found a gap in their western flank. Light resistance, mostly infantry, request permission to exploit. Lieutenant Carter had identified a weakness, a sector of the Iraqi defense with minimal armor support, possibly weakened when al-Rashid diverted tanks to counter the expected American main effort in the southeast. Wolf 1-1, permission granted. Push through and hit their rear areas. Priority targets are command vehicles and artillery positions. Copy that. First platoon moving now. As Carter's platoon exploited the gap, Harrington coordinated increased pressure from 2nd and 3rd platoons, fixing the Iraqi forces in place to prevent them from responding to the threat developing behind them. Morgan's tanks increased their rate of fire, while Phillips's platoon pushed forward aggressively despite continued resistance. All Wolf elements, maximum pressure now. Don't let them shift forces to counter 1st platoon's breakthrough. The battle's tempo increased markedly. The desert battlefield filled with the thunder of tank guns, the chatter of machine guns, and the whoosh of artillery rounds passing overhead. Through the smoke and dust, Harrington monitored 1st platoon's progress as they penetrated deeper into the Iraqi defensive zone. Wolfpack actual, Wolf 1-1. We've reached an enemy rear areas, engaging artillery positions and support vehicles. No sign of command element yet. Continue search for command vehicles. They'll be centrally located, probably with additional antenna arrays. As 1st platoon racked havoc in the Iraqi rear, the pressure on 2nd and 3rd platoons intensified. Al-Rashid, recognizing the threat to his support elements, committed his reserves to a desperate counterattack against the American forces, fixing his main armor in place. Wolf 3-1, taking heavy fire from multiple directions. Request immediate support. Phillips' platoon, already weakened by earlier damage, found itself the focus of concentrated Iraqi attention. 3 T-72s had maneuvered to enfilade positions, catching the American tanks in deadly crossfire. Wolf 2 elements, shift fire to support 3rd platoon eastern sector. Wolfpack actual, moving to reinforce. Harrington's tank accelerated down from its overwatch position, racing to support the beleaguered 3rd platoon. As they moved, Harris continued to engage targets of opportunity, the Abrams stabilized gun system allowing accurate fire even at high speed over rough terrain. They reached Phillips' position just as one of 3rd platoon's tanks took a catastrophic hit, a T-72 round finding a vulnerable spot and detonating the ammunition inside. The Abrams turret lifted momentarily before crashing back down, flames erupting from every hatch. Wolf 3-2 is gone, Phillips reported, his voice tight with controlled rage. No survivors possible. Another 4 men lost. Harrington compartmentalized the grief, focusing on the tactical situation. His tank joined the remaining elements of 3rd platoon, adding its firepower to counter the Iraqi attack. Harris, target lead T-72, Sabot round. Target acquired, firing now. The Abrams main gun roared, sending another depleted uranium dart downrange to strike the advancing Iraqi tank. The T-72 ground to a halt, smoke pouring from its engine compartment. A mobility kill, if not a catastrophic one. With Harrington's tank reinforcing the position, 3rd platoon stabilized its defense, beating back the Iraqi counterattack with disciplined, accurate fire. The tactical situation began to shift as 1st platoon's attack on the rear areas forced al-Rashid to divide his attention between multiple threats. Wolfpack actual, Wolf 1-1, have destroyed enemy artillery and supply vehicles. Now engaging what appears to be command element, multiple T-72s with antenna arrays heavily defended. Carter had found al-Rashid's command group, the heart of the Iraqi defense and potentially the Iraqi colonel himself. If they could eliminate the command element, the entire defensive scheme might collapse. All Wolf elements, priority shift. 2nd platoon maintain pressure on central sector. 3rd platoon hold current positions. Wolfpack actual moving to support 1st platoon against command element. Harrington's tank disengaged from 3rd platoon's position, racing westward to join Carter's attack on the Iraqi command group. The young lieutenant had shown remarkable tactical acumen, finding and exploiting the gap in al-Rashid's defenses and driving deep into the Iraqi rear areas. Now he faced the most heavily defended target on the battlefield, and Harrington intended to ensure he had the support needed to destroy it. Wolf 1-1, Wolfpack actual, approaching your position from southeast. Situation update? Engaged with approximately 5 T-72s in defensive formation around what appears to be command vehicles. They've established interlocking fields of fire. We've destroyed 2 but taken damage to Wolf 1-3. Mobility hit, reduced speed. Enemy infantry with RPGs also present in building's northwest sector. Harrington's tank crested a low rise, bringing the battle scene into view. Carter's platoon was engaged in a fierce firefight with the Iraqi command security element, the American tanks maneuvering aggressively to find firing angles, while the T-72s maintained disciplined defensive positions. Wolf 1 elements. Wolfpack actual joining your attack. Focus fire on northern sector security vehicles. My tank will engage southern elements. As Harrington's Abrams joined the fight, the combined firepower of 5 American tanks began to overwhelm the Iraqi defense. 2 more T-72s erupted in flames as sabot rounds found their mark, creating gaps in the protective screen around the command vehicles. Through these gaps, Harrington caught glimpses of the Iraqi command element, 3 modified T-72s with additional radio equipment in a BTR-60 command vehicle, all positioned in a shallow depression that offered protection from direct fire. All elements engaged with command group, target those command tanks. Priority on the center vehicle with the tallest antenna array. The American tanks adjusted their fire, concentrating on the identified command vehicles. One erupted immediately as multiple sabot rounds struck it simultaneously. The second took a mobility hit, its track severed by a near miss that left it capable of firing but unable to maneuver. The third command tank, the one with the tallest antenna array, likely containing al-Rashid himself, began a fighting withdrawal, using the disabled vehicle as cover while attempting to escape the collapsing defensive perimeter. "Target that retreating command tank," Harrington ordered urgently. "Don't let it escape." Carter's tank had the clearest shot, its position on the northwestern edge of the engagement area, allowing it to track the retreating Iraqi vehicle. Wolf 1-1, engaging now. The Lieutenant's Abrams fired, its sabot round streaking toward the fleeing T-72. A hit, but not a killing one. The round struck a glancing blow that tore away external equipment, but left the tank operational. The Iraqi vehicle disappeared behind a ridgeline, temporarily safe from direct fire. Wolfpack actual, Wolf 1-1, BAM. Target damaged but still mobile, moving northwest behind terrain feature. Request permission to pursue. Negative Wolf 1-1, hold position and continue engaging remaining command elements. Wolfpack actual will pursue. Harrington's decision was instantaneous. Al-Rashid was attempting to escape, possibly to establish a new defensive position or to link up with reinforcements. They couldn't allow that to happen. Reynolds, maximum speed, pursue that command tank. Northwest heading, behind that ridgeline. The Abrams surged forward, its turbine engine howling as Reynolds pushed it to its operational limit. They crested the ridgeline moments later, spotting the damaged Iraqi command tank racing across the open desert beyond, trailing smoke but still moving rapidly. Target range 1800, moving away. Lead it by 2 tank lengths. Harris made the necessary adjustments, compensating for the target's speed and direction. Target acquired. Sabot loaded. Fire. The main gun roared, sending another depleted uranium penetrator in pursuit of the fleeing Iraqi tank. The round fell short, kicking up a fountain of sand just behind the T-72's left track. Reload and adjust. More lead, he's moving faster than estimated. Davis slammed another sabot round into the breech as Harris recalculated his firing solution. Ready. Fire. This time the round struck true, impacting the T-72's engine compartment with devastating effect. The Iraqi tank lurched sideways, smoke pouring from its rear deck as internal fires ignited. It continued forward for another 50 meters before grinding to a halt, immobilized by the catastrophic damage to its power pack. Target mobility killed, engaging again to ensure destruction. A third sabot round completed the job, striking the T-72 squarely in its turret and igniting its ammunition in a spectacular secondary explosion. The turret separated from the hull, flipping end over end before crashing to the desert floor 30 meters away. Target destroyed, Harris reported with professional satisfaction. No survivors possible. Harrington studied the burning wreckage through his sight, searching for confirmation that they had indeed eliminated Colonel al-Rashid. The Iraqi commander had proven remarkably resilient, escaping destruction in their previous encounters. Had they finally ended his threat? No time to verify now. The battle continued behind them, Carter's platoon still engaged with the remaining elements of the Iraqi command group. Reynolds returned to 1st Platoon's position, maximum speed. As they raced back toward the main engagement, Harrington received an update from Battalion. Wolfpack actual, TOC, satellite confirms collapse of enemy defensive positions across all sectors. Enemy forces in disorganized withdrawal northward. You've broken them, Captain. Well done. The destruction of the command element, and possibly al-Rashid himself, had indeed triggered the collapse of the Iraqi defense. Without coordinated leadership, the remaining T-72s were abandoning their positions, retreating individually or in small groups rather than maintaining a coherent defensive line. All Wolf elements, Wolfpack actual, enemy in general retreat, engage targets of opportunity, but conserve ammunition. Focus on damaged vehicles that might be recovered later. By the time Harrington's tank rejoined Carter's platoon, the immediate battle was effectively over. The Iraqi command group had been destroyed, its security element eliminated, and the remaining forces scattered across the desert in disorganized retreat. Lieutenant Carter greeted Harrington's return with a professional report rather than celebration. Wolfpack actual, Wolf 1-1, command group neutralized. 4 T-72s confirmed destroyed, 1 BTR-60 command vehicle captured intact with maps and communications equipment, 3 enemy officers taken prisoner. Casualties? Carter's voice tightened. 1 tank destroyed. Wolf 1-4 took a direct hit from multiple RPGs. Crew status unknown. Recovery team en route. Wolf 1-3 mobility damaged but operational. 2 wounded being treated by medics. Another tank lost, more lives potentially sacrificed. The victory had come at significant cost, as had their previous encounters with al-Rashid's force. Well done, Lieutenant. Establish security perimeter and prepare for potential counterattack. Battalion reports enemy withdrawal, but we can't assume they're finished yet. As Carter's platoon secured the area, Harrington directed his tank toward the captured BTR-60 command vehicle. The intelligence value of its contents could be substantial, potentially confirming al-Rashid's fate and revealing Iraqi defensive plans across the sector. A military intelligence team had already arrived by a helicopter, swarming over the captured vehicle and its contents. Major Collins, the team leader, greeted Harrington as he dismounted from his tank. Captain Harrington, impressive work. We've hit the intelligence jackpot here. What have you found? Collins held up a leather map case. Complete defensive plans for this sector, including fallback positions and supply routes. And this, he produced a small notebook with handwritten Arabic text, appears to be Colonel al-Rashid's personal command journal. My translator says it contains his tactical assessments of American forces, including detailed notes on your company specifically. Harrington accepted the notebook, unable to read its contents but recognizing its significance. Al-Rashid had studied them, analyzed their tactics, prepared counters to their strengths. The professional respect Harrington had developed for his opponent deepened with this evidence of the Iraqi colonel's methodical approach to command. Was al-Rashid in that command tank we destroyed? Collins shook his head. According to the prisoners, he transferred to another vehicle just before your attack broke through. One of the junior officers, a Captain Fawzi, was commanding the tank you destroyed. So al-Rashid had escaped again. Harrington felt a mixture of professional disappointment and grudging admiration. The Iraqi colonel had proven remarkably adept at avoiding destruction, even as his command collapsed around him. Any indication where he went? Prisoners say he was heading north toward the Iraq border, likely attempting to link up with retreating Republican Guard elements from other sectors. The broader strategic situation made pursuit impractical. The ground war was winding down, with Iraqi forces in general retreat across all fronts. Al-Rashid might escape capture, but his military effectiveness had been neutralized with the destruction of his command group and the collapse of his defensive position. TOC, Wolfpack actual, objective secured, enemy command group destroyed, defensive position neutralized, significant intelligence materials captured, requesting instructions for next phase. Over. Wolfpack actual, well done, Alpha Company. Hold current position and establish defensive perimeter. Division Command sending debriefing team priority transport. Colonel Peterson says congratulations on a magnificent victory. Over. Victory. The word felt hollow given the cost. Alpha Company had started the Desert Storm campaign with 14 tanks and 63 men. Now they were down to 10 operational tanks, with at least 18 men killed and many more wounded across the 3 engagements with al-Rashid's force. Harrington walked slowly around the battlefield, surveying the aftermath of the desperate fight. Burning tanks, both American and Iraqi, dotted the landscape, columns of black smoke rising into the desert sky. Recovery teams worked to extract wounded men and salvage damaged equipment. Intelligence officers combed through captured materials, building a clearer picture of the Iraqi defensive scheme and command structure. Lieutenant Carter approached, his young face streaked with soot and grime but his bearing professional as ever. Perimeter established, sir. Second and third platoons rejoining our position now. No sign of enemy counterattack. Casualties across the company. Carter consulted his notebook. 2 tanks destroyed, Wolf 1-4 and Wolf 3-2. 3 tanks with mobility damage but operational. Personnel casualties, 7 killed, 11 wounded, 2 missing. Each number represented a man Harrington was responsible for. Someone's son, brother, husband, father. The tactical victory seemed pale compensation for such losses. Have the chaplain ready when the platoons reassemble. We'll hold a brief service for the fallen before the debriefing team arrives. Yes, sir. As Carter departed to make the arrangements, Harrington found himself alone again, standing amidst the wreckage of battle. They had accomplished their mission, destroying or scattering al-Rashid's force and securing the strategic crossroads. The southern supply routes were safe, the Iraqi threat neutralized. But the cost haunted him. Not just the men lost today, but throughout the campaign against al-Rashid. Good soldiers who had fought with courage and skill against a determined, capable enemy. Their sacrifice had secured victory, but would never be publicly acknowledged due to the classified nature of their operations. Lieutenant Morgan found him there, the veteran of all 3 engagements, looking as exhausted as Harrington felt, but with the quiet satisfaction of a professional who had completed a difficult mission successfully. They're saying we destroyed or disabled 27 tanks today, Morgan reported without preamble, plus artillery, infantry fighting vehicles, and support elements. Biggest single-day tank kill since World War II. Harrington nodded, acknowledging the achievement without celebrating it. And al-Rashid escaped again. This time he's running with his tail between his legs, not withdrawing in good order. We broke his command, scattered his forces. He's finished as an effective combat leader in this war. Small consolation to the families of the men we lost stopping him. Morgan's expression softened. No, sir, but they did their duty, and they did it exceptionally well. This company faced the best the Iraqis had, and we beat them 3 times despite being outnumbered in every engagement. That's something to be proud of. Before Harrington could respond, a radio operator approached with a handset. Captain Harrington? Colonel Peterson on Secure Channel 1 for you, sir. Harrington accepted the handset. Wolfpack Actual. James, it's Frank. Peterson rarely used first names over the radio, an indication of the conversation's personal nature. I've been watching the satellite feed. Magnificent operation, absolutely textbook execution of the attack plan. Division commander is recommending you for the Silver Star. The men did the fighting, sir. I just pointed them in the right direction. Don't sell yourself short, Captain. You faced one of Saddam's best commanders with a reconstituted company and limited support, and you crushed him. The entire southern flank is secure because of what Alpha Company accomplished today. Harrington knew Peterson was right on the strategic level. The destruction of al-Rashid's force had eliminated the last significant threat to the coalition's southern supply routes, allowing the main offensive to continue without concern for its logistical tail. Thank you, sir. Any word on al-Rashid himself? Intelligence is tracking a high-speed convoy heading toward Basra, possibly including al-Rashid, but we've been ordered not to pursue across the border. The diplomatic situation is delicate, with ceasefire negotiations underway. Your engagement may well have been one of the last major tank battles of the war. The irony wasn't lost on Harrington. After 3 increasingly desperate battles, al-Rashid might escape final justice due to political considerations beyond the battlefield. Understood, sir. What are our orders now? Hold your position until the debriefing team arrives. They'll collect all intelligence materials and interview key personnel. After that, Alpha Company will withdraw to forward operating base Sword for recuperation and refit. The ground war is winding down, James. You and your men may have fought the last significant tank battle of Desert Storm. Copy all, sir. Wolfpack Actual out. Harrington returned the handset to the radio operator, processing Peterson's words. The last tank battle of Desert Storm. A fitting conclusion to their campaign against al-Rashid, though the Iraqi colonel's escape left the narrative feeling somehow unfinished. As he walked back toward his tank, Harrington spotted Lieutenant Carter organizing the company chaplain's service for the fallen. The young officer had performed admirably in his first combat command, displaying tactical intelligence and personal courage that validated Peterson's decision to assign him to Alpha Company. Carter noticed Harrington's approach and straightened to attention. At ease, Lieutenant. The service ready? Yes, sir. All available personnel assembled. Wounded who can be moved brought forward. Chaplain is prepared to begin at your order. Harrington nodded, studying the assembled men of Alpha Company, veterans of the original unit mixed with replacement personnel who had just experienced their first taste of combat. Despite their different backgrounds and experience levels, they had fought together as a cohesive team, overcoming al-Rashid's elaborate defensive scheme through courage, skill, and determination. Before the chaplain begins, I'd like to say a few words. Carter nodded, gesturing for Harrington to take position before the assembled company. The men stood or sat in a loose semicircle, their faces showing the physical and emotional exhaustion of combat, but their bearings still professional, still proud. Harrington took a moment to study them, these men who had followed him into battle against a superior force, who had trusted his leadership and given their all to accomplish the mission. What could he possibly say that would acknowledge their sacrifice and honor their achievement? In the end, he kept it simple. Men of Alpha Company, the Steel Wolves, today you accomplished something extraordinary. Outnumbered more than 2-to-1, facing one of the enemy's most capable commanders in prepared defensive positions, you broke through, destroyed his command, and scattered his forces. Division Command is calling it one of the most significant armored victories of the entire campaign. He paused, making eye contact with as many of the assembled soldiers as possible. But victories come at a cost. Today we lost 7 brave men, with others wounded and 2 still missing. Throughout our 3 engagements with Colonel al-Rashid's forces, we've lost nearly a third of our original strength. Each of those men gave everything they had for their country, for their mission, and for each other. As your commander, I can ask no more than that, and I am humbled by their sacrifice. Harrington gestured to the chaplain, indicating he was finished. As the religious officer stepped forward to begin the memorial service, Harrington took position beside Morgan and Carter, the 3 officers standing shoulder to shoulder as they honored the fallen of Alpha Company. The service was brief but meaningful, the chaplain's words offering comfort to the survivors while acknowledging the harsh reality of combat and the finality of death on the battlefield. When it concluded, the men dispersed to their assigned duties, preparing for the arrival of the debriefing team and the eventual withdrawal to Forward Operating Base Sword. Harrington returned to his tank, climbing atop the turret to survey the battlefield one last time. The Iraqi dead were being collected by prisoner-of-war teams, the wounded treated by medical personnel without regard for nationality. Damaged vehicles were being assessed for recovery or destruction in place, preventing their technology from falling into enemy hands. From this vantage point, he could see the entire engagement area, the southeastern approach where the battle had begun, the western flank where Carter had found and exploited the gap in al-Rashid's defenses, the command position they had ultimately destroyed. The tactical picture was clear now, though it had been anything but during the heat of combat. Al-Rashid had constructed an elaborate defensive scheme with mutually supporting positions and carefully placed ambush elements. The initial trap might have worked against a less experienced or responsive force, but Alpha Company had reacted quickly, adjusting their plan and finding the weak point in the Iraqi defense. The decisive moment had come when Carter identified the gap on the western flank, allowing the Americans to penetrate to the Iraqi rear areas and destroy the command element. A helicopter appeared on the horizon, the debriefing team from division headquarters, arriving to collect intelligence materials and interview key personnel. The aftermath phase was beginning, the battle transitioning from immediate tactical concerns to strategic analysis and historical documentation. Harrington descended from the turret, preparing to meet the debriefing team and provide his account of the engagement. As he did, he spotted something half buried in the sand near his tank, a small object glinting in the afternoon sun. Curious, he bent to retrieve it. It was a brass casing from a T-72's 125mm main gun, ejected during firing and somehow thrown clear of its parent vehicle. Harrington turned it in his hands, studying the Cyrillic markings on its base. A simple artifact of battle, yet symbolically powerful. The spent ammunition of an enemy who had fought with courage and skill before being overcome. Harrington pocketed the brass casing, a personal memento of the campaign against Colonel al-Rashid and the men who had fought and died during those 3 desperate engagements. Someday, perhaps, the full story could be told publicly. For now, it remained classified, known only to those who had lived it and to the intelligence officers who would analyze its lessons. The helicopter landed in a swirl of sand and engine noise, disgorging a team of officers and intelligence specialists. Harrington straightened his uniform and walked forward to meet them, ready to provide his report on Alpha Company's final victory against the Desert Tiger. Chapter 2, Hero's Legacy. And that's where the classified operations ended. Colonel James Harrington told reporter Todd Cooper, his weathered face reflecting memories both proud and painful. Alpha Company was withdrawn to Forward Operating Base Sword, then rotated back to Germany as the ground war concluded. The battle at the crossroads was classified, like our previous engagements with al-Rashid, due to diplomatic sensitivities with our Saudi allies. Cooper studied his notes, trying to absorb the incredible story he'd just heard. But what happened to al-Rashid? Did he escape completely? Harrington's expression turned reflective. Intelligence tracked him to Basra, then lost him in the chaos of the Iraqi retreat. For years, we assumed he'd survived the war and either continued serving Saddam's regime or gone into hiding. But that's not what happened. No, Harrington reached into his pocket, extracting a worn brass casing, the same one he'd picked up on the battlefield 30 years earlier. In 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, an intelligence team discovered files in Baghdad that revealed al-Rashid's fate. He'd reached Basra safely, but Saddam's regime held him responsible for the loss of his command in the strategic crossroads. He was executed 3 months after returning to Iraq. Cooper absorbed this information silently. The story had taken an unexpected turn, the professional rivalry between two commanders ending not in battlefield victory or defeat, but in the brutal politics of a dictatorial regime. So he survived your battles only to be killed by his own government. Ironic, isn't it? We developed a grudging professional respect for each other across those 3 engagements. I studied his tactics, he studied mine. We adapted to each other's strategies, learned from each encounter. In another circumstance, we might have been colleagues rather than enemies. Did you ever discover how he anticipated your attack plans? You mentioned a possible security issue. Harrington nodded. His personal journal, captured with the command vehicle, revealed that the Iraqis had Soviet-supplied radio direction finding equipment. They couldn't decode our transmissions, but they could track the location and frequency of radio traffic. Al-Rashid used that information to deduce our intentions based on which units were communicating and from where. Brilliant work with limited intelligence resources. Cooper glanced at the display case containing Harrington's medals. You received the Silver Star for the Crossroads battle. Yes, and more importantly, 12 of my men received decorations for valor, including Lieutenant Carter, who earned a Silver Star of his own for the flanking maneuver that broke al-Rashid's defense. Harrington's voice softened. Many of those decorations were awarded posthumously. What happened to the survivors? Lieutenant Morgan, Sergeant Harris, the others? Morgan stayed in the Army, retired as a full colonel. Last I heard, he was teaching military history at West Point. Carter made brigadier general before retiring. Reynolds left the service after his enlistment ended, went back to his family farm in Nebraska. Harris became a tank gunnery instructor, trained a generation of Abrams crews before retiring. The others scattered to various careers and lives. We hold a reunion every 5 years. Fewer attend each time, of course. Age and illness taking their toll where Iraqi tanks failed. Harrington fell silent, lost in memories of comrades long dispersed. Cooper waited respectfully, sensing the emotional weight of the narrative for the old warrior. Colonel, he finally asked, why tell this story now, after 30 years of silence? Harrington turned the brass casing over in his hand, studying it as if seeing it for the first time. 2 reasons. First, the operation was finally declassified last year, though it received little attention given how much time has passed. Second, and more importantly, the men who fought those battles deserve recognition for what they accomplished. History has largely forgotten the tank battles of Desert Storm, focusing instead on the air campaign and the 100-hour ground war. But what Alpha Company did, facing one of the enemy's best commanders while outnumbered in 3 separate engagements and winning each time, deserves to be remembered. Cooper nodded, understanding the motivation. Veterans often sought not personal glory but recognition for their units, their comrades, their shared experience of combat that civilians could never truly comprehend. One last question, if I may. You mentioned keeping that brass casing as a memento. Why that particular item? Harrington smiled slightly. It reminded me that our enemies are human too. Al-Rashid was a professional soldier doing his duty as he saw it, just as we were. This casing came from a gun that tried to kill me and my men, but it represents something more. The strange respect that can develop between opponents who recognize each other's skill and courage. He pocketed the casing again. In war, we dehumanize the enemy out of necessity. It's easier to kill a faceless opponent, but after the guns fall silent, recognizing the humanity on both sides is part of how we heal. Al-Rashid was a worthy opponent who fought well with the resources available to him. I'd like to think he felt the same about us. Cooper closed his notebook, sensing the interview had reached its natural conclusion. The story of Alpha Company's battles against Colonel al-Rashid's forces would make a compelling article, honoring men whose courage and sacrifice had remained unrecognized for 3 decades. Thank you, Colonel Harrington. American Valor magazine will ensure this story is told properly. That's all I ask, not for myself, but for the men who followed me into those battles, especially those who never came home. As they walked toward the museum exit, passing displays of tanks from conflicts across American history, Cooper had one final unscripted question. Do you miss it? The intensity of combat, the clarity of purpose? Harrington considered this thoughtfully. Not the combat itself, no sane person misses having others trying to kill them. But the brotherhood, the absolute trust between men whose lives depend on each other, yes, I miss that. Civilian life offers few experiences that compare. Outside the museum, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Fort Knox's parade ground. A training exercise was underway in the distance, modern Abrams tanks maneuvering across the Kentucky landscape, preparing a new generation of soldiers for conflicts yet to come. Harrington watched them for a moment, then turned to Cooper with a final observation. We called ourselves the Steel Wolves, but the steel was just the platform. The true strength of Alpha Company was the men, their courage, their skill, their refusal to yield even when outnumbered and outpositioned. Remember that when you write your article. The tanks didn't win those battles, the men inside them did. The men, with a firm handshake, Colonel James "Iron Jim" Harrington departed, walking with the straight-back posture of a career soldier despite his 73 years. Cooper watched him go, reflecting on the extraordinary story he'd been entrusted to tell. A tale of courage, sacrifice, and the strange respect that can develop between worthy opponents on opposite sides of a conflict. The story of the Steel Wolves and their battles against the Desert Tiger would finally be told, 30 years after the guns fell silent on that distant desert battlefield. Chapter 3, Eternal Brotherhood. 10 years after his landmark interview with reporter Todd Cooper at the National Armor Museum, Colonel James Harrington, now 83, returned to Fort Knox for what would likely be the final reunion of Alpha Company's Steel Wolves. The article Cooper had written had finally brought public recognition to their achievements, and a follow-up documentary produced by the History Channel had expanded their story to a broader audience. Now, 40 years after those desperate desert battles, the surviving veterans gathered once more to honor their shared experience. The reunion was being held in a small conference room at the on-base hotel, a modest gathering compared to earlier years. Time had taken its toll on the men of Alpha Company, just as expected. Many had passed away, others were too ill to travel. Today, only 7 veterans had managed to make the journey to Fort Knox, a poignant reminder of mortality's undefeated record. Lieutenant, now retired Colonel, Michael Morgan greeted Harrington at the door, his once dark hair now completely white, but his handshake still firm. At 69, the former MIT engineer had aged well, keeping physically and mentally active through teaching at West Point and consulting work. Jim, wasn't sure you'd make it this year. Harrington smiled, genuinely pleased to see his former second-in-command. Wouldn't miss it, Mike. Not when we've declared this the final official gathering. Morgan nodded, understanding the significance. Come in, everyone's here except Reynolds. Doctor wouldn't clear him for travel after his heart surgery, but he sent a video message. Inside, 5 other veterans of Alpha Company waited. William Carter, the young lieutenant who had found the gap in al-Rashid's defenses, now a retired brigadier general with grandchildren in college. Sergeant Robert Harris, the gunner whose precision shooting had destroyed countless Iraqi tanks, now stooped with age but eyes still sharp beneath bushy white eyebrows. Master Sergeant David Phillips, who had led 3rd Platoon during the final battle at the Crossroads. Specialist Aaron Davis, Harrington's loader during all 3 engagements. And somewhat surprisingly, Sergeant Jackson, whose tank had been disabled during the desperate withdrawal to the Marine positions, recovered from wounds that had ended his Army career prematurely. They greeted Harrington with the respect due a former commander, but also the easy familiarity of men who had shared the crucible of combat. No matter their subsequent rank or accomplishments, The bond forged in those desert battles remained their fundamental connection. "Captain on deck," Harris announced with a grin, using the rank Harrington had held during their shared combat experience rather than his retired rank of colonel. "At ease, you old reprobates," Harrington replied, easing into a chair at the table where memorabilia from their service had been arranged. Photographs, unit patches, even a scale model of an M1A1 Abrams tank in desert camouflage. Morgan took charge as the informal master of ceremonies, a role he had assumed for these reunions years ago. "Gentlemen, welcome to the final official reunion of Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 2nd Armored Regiment, the Steel Wolves. Before we begin our usual reminiscences and lies about how good we were, I've arranged a special surprise." He activated a large screen on the wall, which displayed a video conference connection. After a moment, the screen filled with the image of an elegant conference room somewhere in Europe, where an elderly Arab man sat at a table with several younger individuals who appeared to be family members. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Tariq al-Fawzi, son of Captain Mahmoud al-Fawzi of the Iraqi Republican Guard. Captain al-Fawzi served as Colonel al-Rashid's executive officer during our engagements." Harrington straightened in his chair, astonished. In 40 years, no one from Alpha Company had ever had contact with any of their former Iraqi opponents. Tariq al-Fawzi spoke in perfect English, his dignified bearing suggesting a man of education and accomplishment. "Colonel Harrington, gentlemen of Alpha Company, I am honored to meet you at last, even if only through this technology. My father spoke of you often in the years after the war." "Your father survived?" Harrington asked, genuinely surprised. Intelligence reports had indicated few survivors among al-Rashid's command group. "Yes, though wounded during your attack on the command position. He was in the BTR-60 command vehicle you captured, but managed to escape before being taken prisoner. After the war, he eventually left Iraq and brought our family to France, where he worked as an engineering consultant until his death in 2015. Morgan leaned forward, curiosity evident. "Mr. al-Fawzi, forgive my directness, but why reach out to us after all these years? And how did you find us?" Tariq smiled. "The how is perhaps easier to explain first. After the History Channel documentary aired 5 years ago, my family recognized my father's unit in Colonel al-Rashid's name. We recorded it and sent it to my father, who confirmed these were indeed the Americans he had faced in the desert. After his passing, I found detailed instructions in his will about contacting you. As for why," Tariq continued, "my father left specific instructions that I should attempt to contact the American unit that had fought against Colonel al-Rashid's force. He said they were worthy opponents who deserved to know the full story of those engagements, particularly what happened to Colonel al-Rashid himself." Harrington exchanged glances with Morgan and Carter. "We were told al-Rashid was executed by Saddam's regime after returning to Baghdad." "That is the official story, yes, but the truth is more complex." Tariq consulted some papers before him. "According to my father's account, Colonel al-Rashid was indeed summoned to Baghdad after the war, but rather than being executed immediately, he was interrogated extensively about the battles against your company. Saddam's military leadership was particularly interested in how an American armor company had defeated a superior Iraqi force in 3 consecutive engagements." The veterans listened intently, this unexpected connection to their long-ago opponent providing a new perspective on battles they had revisited in memory for decades. "Al-Rashid's detailed analysis of your tactics, particularly Colonel Harrington's command decisions, actually impressed Saddam's generals. They recognized that al-Rashid had faced an exceptionally capable American unit led by a commander who adapted quickly to battlefield developments. Rather than execution, al-Rashid was reassigned to Iraq's military academy, where he taught armored warfare tactics until 1995. "What happened to him then?" Carter asked. Tariq's expression turned grimmer. "He was implicated in a plot against Saddam's regime, falsely, according to my father. This time there was no reprieve. He was executed in December 1995, along with several other senior officers suspected of disloyalty." Harrington absorbed this information silently, his mind revisiting the battles against the man they had called the Desert Tiger. Al-Rashid had been a worthy opponent indeed, his tactical skill nearly overcoming the technological advantages of the American forces. To learn that he had survived longer than previously believed, even teaching the lessons learned from their encounters, seemed fitting somehow. "Mr. al-Fawzi, did your father leave any other information about Colonel al-Rashid or those battles?" Harrington asked. "Yes. He maintained a personal journal throughout his military career, including detailed accounts of the 3 engagements with your company. In his final years, he translated these entries into English, saying that someday the Americans who had fought so well should know how they were perceived by their opponents. Tariq held up a leather-bound volume. I have had copies made for each of you as my father wished. They will be delivered to your hotel rooms later today. The gesture left the veterans momentarily speechless. After 40 years, to receive a first-hand account from the other side of the battlefield was an unexpected gift, a chance to see those desperate desert battles through the eyes of their opponents. Thank you, Harrington finally said, speaking for all of them. Your father was a professional soldier doing his duty, as were we. Please know that we hold no animosity toward him or his comrades who fought honorably. Tariq nodded appreciatively. My father said much the same about you, Colonel. He believed that soldiers on opposite sides of a conflict could still recognize and respect each other's courage and skill. That professional respect transcends the political divisions that create wars in the first place. After a few more minutes of conversation, the video call ended with mutual expressions of goodwill. The veterans of Alpha Company sat in thoughtful silence, processing this unexpected connection to their long-ago adversaries. Well, Morgan finally said, that was not how I expected this reunion to begin. Harris chuckled. 40 years later, and al-Rashid still manages to surprise us. Some things never change. The ice broken, the veterans fell into the familiar rhythm of reunion, sharing memories, updating each other on their lives, remembering comrades no longer present. They viewed Reynolds' video message, the former tank driver apologizing for his absence, while proudly introducing great-grandchildren who knew little of his wartime service. Throughout the afternoon, the conversation repeatedly returned to those 3 desperate battles against al-Rashid's forces. With the perspective of 4 decades, the veterans could appreciate the larger context of their small but significant role in Desert Storm. The destruction of al-Rashid's command at the strategic crossroads had secured the coalition's southern flank during the final phase of the ground war, preventing what could have been a devastating attack on vulnerable supply lines. As evening approached, Morgan called for attention once more. Before we conclude what will likely be our last gathering as a unit, I have something to show you. He activated the screen again, this time displaying a documentary title, Steel Wolves, The Secret Tank Battles of Desert Storm. This is premiering on the Military History Channel next month. The producer is Todd Cooper's son, yes, the same Todd Cooper who interviewed Jim for American Valor magazine 10 years ago. Before he died last year, Cooper passed all his research and notes to his son, who expanded it into this documentary. I've seen an advanced copy, and it tells our story well. They even found archival footage from some of our engagements that none of us knew existed. Harrington was moved by the news. Cooper's article years ago had finally brought public recognition to Alpha Company's achievements, but a documentary would reach a much broader audience, ensuring the story of the Steel Wolves would be preserved for future generations. I think I speak for all of us, he said, looking around at his aging comrades. When I say that our concern was never personal recognition, but ensuring the sacrifices of our fallen brothers were acknowledged and remembered. This documentary helps accomplish that. The others nodded in agreement, their thoughts turning to comrades lost during those distant desert battles. Young men whose lives had ended in fire and steel, their potential futures erased in moments of violence that had helped secure victory in a war most Americans had already begun to forget. As the reunion drew to a close, Harrington found himself standing apart from the group, gazing out the window at Fort Knox's training grounds, where a new generation of tank crews learned their craft. The Abrams tanks they trained on were advanced descendants of the models Alpha Company had taken into battle against al-Rashid's forces, just as these young soldiers were the professional descendants of the Steel Wolves. Morgan joined him at the window following his gaze. Hard to believe it's been 40 years. Harder still to believe we're still here to talk about it, Harrington replied with a wry smile, while so many others aren't. Morgan nodded, understanding the weight behind the words. You know what struck me about Tariq al-Fawzi's call? His father could have been any one of us, a professional soldier following orders, doing his best with the resources available, trying to bring his men home alive while accomplishing the mission. The uniforms and equipment were different, but the fundamental experience wasn't. The universal soldier, Harrington agreed, separated by politics and geography, united by the shared experience of combat. They stood in companionable silence, 2 old warriors watching the eternal cycle of military preparation continue on the training grounds below. The specifics changed with technology and doctrine, but the essence remained constant. Men learning to work together as cohesive units, developing the trust and coordination that would keep them alive when theory became deadly reality. "This is really the last one?" Harrington finally asked, referring to the reunion. Morgan nodded. "We're down to 7 attendees, Jim. Next year might be 4. The year after that, even fewer. Better to end with dignity than to watch our numbers dwindle until no one's left to remember." The practical assessment is characteristic of Morgan's engineering mind, but Harrington detected the emotion beneath the logical exterior. These reunions had been a constant in their lives for decades, a connection to experiences that had shaped them fundamentally. "The Steel Wolves will still exist as long as any of us draw breath," Harrington said. "And now, with Cooper's son's documentary and Alfawzi's father's journal, our story will outlive us all." Morgan smiled at that. Not a bad legacy for a tank company that officially never fought the battles it's remembered for. The other veterans joined them, forming a loose semicircle at the window, each man lost in his own reflections on youth, courage, fear, and survival. They had been young once, facing death in a distant desert while the world's attention focused elsewhere. Now they were old, the last witnesses to battles that had nearly faded from collective memory. "Gentlemen," Harrington said, turning to face his former comrades, "it has been the honor of my life to serve with you. What we accomplished against Colonel al-Rashid's forces was remarkable by any military standard. But more important than the tactical victory was how we achieved it, together supporting each other, never yielding despite the odds against us. The Steel Wolves earned their name through your courage, your skill, and your determination." He raised an imaginary glass in toast. "To absent friends." "To absent friends," they echoed, remembering comrades 4 decades gone yet still present in memory. Outside, the sun set over Fort Knox, casting long shadows across training grounds where America's armored forces prepared for conflicts yet unimagined. Inside, 7 old warriors commemorated battles long past, honoring sacrifices mostly forgotten by the nation they had served but forever preserved in their own memories, and now, finally, in historical record. The Steel Wolves had completed their final mission, ensuring that the courage and sacrifice of their fallen comrades would not be lost to history. Like the brass casing Harrington had carried for 40 years, the story of their desperate battles against Colonel al-Rashid's forces would remain as testament to the cost of victory and the strange respect that can develop between worthy opponents across the chaos of the battlefield. In war and peace, in youth and age, in life and death, they remained what they had always been, the Steel Wolves of Alpha Company, bound by shared danger and mutual trust, a brotherhood forged in fire that even time could not dissolve.